Citizen fan. Their slogan was, "We come to work." That's what Detroit about. That's why they used it. It's a team thing. They won 2 championships, a team. There was no star. No mayor can come in here and be a star. It's a team thing. No governors can come in here and think you can do it by yourself. It's a team thing. You got communities. They got ideas too. The only thing wrong with Detroit, people have lost hope here. Residents, city workers, so much corruption. They lose hope. But I grew up here. I love this city. I think it can come back. I've been working for the city 24 and a half years. Within the last 10 years, we took 4 pay cuts, and then an additional 10% wage cut. I've lost a home.
When you take all of the decisions out of the city of Detroit, all of us, then what do you have? Exactly what we got, a lot of problems. Every time the city seems to fall into a problem, it's always on the backs of us workers.
You wake up out of a dead sleep and you jump behind the wheel and take off driving and try to get everybody there safe, not knowing really what you're pulling up to. Not eligible for Social Security, so the pension is my sole salary at this point.
We've been in business here 39 years. We've seen a lot of changes in Detroit. The area was a lot of industry, a lot of city workers. It's getting very tough for the city workers. It's getting tough for us as a business people.
Response times are increasing because of the closing of companies, which takes your insurance rate through the roof. So all the things that affect us affect the citizens.
I worked for the city in different capacities for 29 years. I feel like an old jacket. They use me up and they throw me away. In my condition, nobody's gonna hire me. I'm 68 years old. Half the times, I can't get my blood pressure medicine. It's either feeding myself blood pressure or paying bills.
$754. By the time they take all the deductions for I have my car insurance, my house insurance, and my health insurance taken out. So the time they take all that, I'll get about $300 after they take all that out. I don't understand it. I can't see how the governor is allowing this to happen and what they're doing and they want to blame it all on the seniors. Not only the seniors, but the city workers. And we worked hard. I know I worked hard.
I've been in Detroit since 1946. I was 14 years old when I came in. I don't live large at all. I wish I could. I haven't opened the last time I've been shopping. I only get $1,100, and I'm 81 years old, and I need every penny that I can get and that I do get. And I'm very, very upset about the idea of them taking away my pensions that I worked 30 years for.
I think it's terrible that they talk about Detroit like they do, because Detroit has been very good to me.
I have a lot of city workers coming in with their uniforms on, Detroit Water Department, Police Department, Fire Department. I get a lot of people, the Border Patrol come in. So if I lose that customer base, I'm going to be in a position where I might have to close down. If they take away their pensions, if they start cutting jobs, it's going to cut into a large percentage of not only our business, but other businesses that are in the city of Detroit. We're here. We've been here for 26 years. We're still trying to do business in the city.
Detroiters are survivors. They tough, they adapt, but only can do so much when your politicians ahead of you and we're not on the same team. We're not gonna let Detroit be erased, bulldozed, or whatever. We're gonna fight to the bitter end. Detroit gonna survive.
Two anti-government, self-described revolutionaries have shot up a pizza restaurant as well as a Walmart in Las Vegas.
The internationally syndicated political series, The David Pakman Show, provides progressive talk, analysis, and interviews with the nation's youngest radio and television host, David Pakman. Find out more and catch up on all the latest episodes by visiting our website at freespeech.org.
You know, sometimes when I'm walking down the street, I'm not necessarily looking out and seeing all these water-wasting lawns and people that aren't as connected to their neighbors and their lives as they could be. I'm walking down the street looking, going, edible oases, rainwater, fed landscape, and just looking at the possibility of these sort of landscapes up and down the streets of neighborhoods and communities all across this world. Small actions do ripple and they add up and they have a cumulative impact. And so when you're building upon your small mindful actions, you know, you have the confidence and the ability to take on something a little bit greater. So that could be nice. This, in the context of where we're at as a planet with climate change and these really big issues and people that are more disconnected and less skilled than ever, it becomes even more amazing and powerful how much of a solution this is to design these ecological gardens and to come together with shared vision and shared voice. There's never been a time where your choices have mattered more. Doing something as simple as us transforming a landscape creates a model that anybody could look at far and wide, and you're sharing food and connecting and building skills together in your own neighborhood. It's a richer way to live in normal times, but in the new normal of climate change and erratic weather and economic upheaval, it becomes essential. Whether it's me, you, Gandhi, Che, MLK, Willy Wonka, whoever, past, present, or future, the power of our daily actions is all that we have. You know, and like Archimedes said, give me a place to stand and a lever long enough and I'll move the world. And that's what those simple actions do. They move the world every day.
When I started learning about nutrition, about which, by the way, much less is known than you might think, I learned that what mattered most about one's health was not necessarily the nutrients, good or bad, that you were consuming or staying away from, or even the calorie counts. But what predicted a healthy diet more than anything else is the fact that it was being cooked by a human being and not a corporation. Corporations cook very differently than people do. They use vast amounts of salt, fat, and sugar, much more than you would ever use in your own cooking. And the reason they do that is those are three incredibly attractive and incredibly cheap ingredients. And when they're layered properly, as in a chip or pastries and forms of junk food, they're incredibly addictive. They really press our buttons. They activate our dopamine network, our cravings. And in fact, people in the industry, they don't talk about addiction in the food industry, even though they traffic in addiction. They talk about craveability. It's the same thing. And snackability is another term they use. It's a lovely word. And then the last point about corporate cooking that's important to understand is they cook different stuff than you do at home. What they're good at, in general, they don't cook that well, but things like chips, they cook incredibly well. And here's a classic food that if you make it yourself, if you've ever made French fries, you have to wash the potatoes, you have to peel the potatoes, you have to slice the potatoes, you have to fry them in a lot of oil, you have to spatter your entire stovetop, you have to clean up, and then you have this pot of oil you have to get rid of. I mean, it's really difficult, and it's a pain. They're wonderful, but it's a pain. And if you make them yourself, you'll only eat them every 6 weeks, 2 months, because it's too much work. But when you let corporations cook for you, it's so simple and so inexpensive, and they're really good, that you will have them twice a day, as many people in America do. So you see the kinds of foods you end up with are these labor-intensive foods and desserts. These special occasion foods become everyday foods when we let industry cook for us. Eat anything you want, just cook it yourself.
You wouldn't let money just blow out of your house. So when your AC or heater is on, make sure the doors, windows, and fireplace flue are shut tight. If you're headed out, turn down the AC or lower the heat by 10 degrees. And always keep your water heater set at 120. A little bit of common sense goes a long way. Get more great tips at energysaver.gov.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
Broadcasting around the nation, on your radio, on your TV, and online. This is the Bill Press Show.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy New Year's Eve, America. Richard Fowler here, filling in for the one and only Bill Press, who is taking a well-needed vacation. So it's you, me, that cup of coffee, and yes, I guess the stencil that you're going to use tonight when the ball drops. Happy New Year's Eve, America. And always, this show is nothing without the fabulous team here at the Bill Press Show. We have A Squared in the control booth, Alicia and Elisa.
Hey, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning, good morning, good morning. And on the cameras that keep this show going, the one and only Cyprian Bolden, who's back. Cyprian, how are you?
He came back for you, Richard.
Oh, hey, listen, and I love him for it. Listen, folks, it's New Year's Eve here on the show. Well, it's New Year's Eve. I think there's some places that it might be New Year's already. No, I think I might be wrong. No, I'm right.
Almost.
No, I think I'm right. Like the national date line is somewhere in the Pacific, and somebody's already celebrating 2015, but right here in America, it's still 2014, and you're still stuck with me. But, listen, there's a lot of folks who are doing a lot of things for New Year's Eve. Here, listen to this clip. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a good way to start off the show. There's a guy talking about what's on his bucket list.
It's on the bucket list, isn't it? It's one of those things you do before you die. Whether you have a good time at the time or not is kind of irrelevant.
He is in Times Square. He's talking about hanging out in Times Square. Now, listen, I did it. Well, not really. I got close to doing the Times Square thing once, in that I went to a party that was in Times Square at a venue in Times Square, but that was close to the ball, but it was too cold to go outside.
But you were nice and safe, warm inside.
Yeah, warm
with
inside,
an open bar, maybe.
Absolutely, with an open bar. There was no food, though, which I think made it for a hard night, but it was still a wonderful, wonderful event. This New Year's Eve, I think I'm going to take it in calm, real calm, hang out with some close friends and bring in the new year calmly. I just think, it's 2014 was such a bang. Why not end as calm as possible?
That sounds good. And especially, it's supposed to be really cold out. I'm going to do the same, kind of be indoors with a fire, some champagne.
Yeah.
Hang out with the dog.
I'm about harder liquors than champagne, but same difference.
We'll start with the champagne and then see where it goes from there.
Good answer. Good answer. But right now, folks, before we get into the meat of the show, it's time for your Full Court Press.
This is the Full Court Press.
Other headlines this morning. Good news. The 41st president has finally gone home. After a week in the hospital, George H.W. Bush has been discharged. He's been suffering shortness of breath, but his doctors managed to restore normal breathing yesterday. An assistant to the 90-year-old Bush says his boss is now back at home, resting comfortably and grateful to the doctors and nurses for care he describes as superb. So he will be home for New Year's Eve.
All I want for New Year's Eve is to be home. Listen, I gotta tell you, for some reason I like Daddy Bush.
I like him too. He's very dignified.
Yeah, he's very much like, I'm not saying he was a good president, but he's definitely a good statesman.
And he still parachutes every 5 years on his birthday.
He's braver than me.
That is hardcore.
I would never jump out of a plane. Well, never say never, America.
I don't know if you're going to be looking for a new job in 2015, but if you are, hackers are wanted at the FBI. In the wake of its investigation into the Sony hack, the FBI has launched a new online campaign to recruit cyber experts with a background in, quote, ethical hacking. What? The effort includes a YouTube video where they talk about what is most important, and it's if you watch it, it's very funny. It's very Mission Impossible.
So here's my question. What's ethical hacking?
That's a good question. It's almost like when you talk to a Navy SEAL and they talk about tactical proficiency.
Or when
it's hard to wrap your head around it.
Yeah, it's just like ethical shoplifting.
Yeah,
or like,
exactly.
I'm an ethical shoplifter.
Yes, I am a moral thief.
Yeah, I mean, I guess because at some point in time you had to be unethical to like learn the skills, right?
Completely, yeah. It is very subversive.
Like if you're going to be a hacker, I think at some point in time, like you have to hack something, and hacking is, I guess, quote unquote, illegal and unethical.
Yeah, you don't really go to school for hacking.
No.
It's a black market operation.
Exactly, which is part of the problem. But
yeah, but the FBI wants you, apparently, if you have those skills.
Listen, if you're a hacker out there, the FBI is looking for you, and they won't send you to jail. They'll give you a paycheck.
And watch out, they might be able to find you, so just be careful.
Touché.
President Obama has been busy. He also responded to a Dear Santa letter recently sent from a Chicago kid, 13-year-old Malik Bryant of Chicago's violent Inglewood neighborhood. Wrote a letter to Santa saying, "All I ask is for safety. I just want to be safe." But rather than reaching the North Pole, the letter made it to the White House, and President Obama responded. In a letter sent back to Bryant, the president assured the 7th grader his security is a priority for him, saying, "I'm confident that you can achieve anything you imagine. I will be rooting for you." Signed, Barack Obama. Which is very touching and very heartfelt, and we wish the very best for Malik Bryant for his new year right on the horizon.
We definitely do, and I think as we go into this new year, I think, and we'll talk about this a lot on the show today, guys, but safety.
It really is one of the first priorities of the nation right now.
Oh yeah, I think beyond the first priority.
Mm-hmm.
If there was something, a number before one. It's like the 0 hour. Thank you. And I think that's a perfect lead into, where we want to take the first part of this show this morning. And I got to tell you, folks, I have been blessed to sort of, I guess blessed is the wrong word, but I'll use it anyway, to really sort of get I've tried the best to wrap my arms and my mind around both what happened to Michael Brown in Ferguson, add that onto what happened to Eric Garner in New York City, and now we're talking about Tamar Rice, and the names go on, and the countless others. I've been to Ferguson twice. I've been on the ground there. I was on the ground there the day the verdict came down. I will say that I haven't been to New York since the Eric. Well, I've been to I've been to New York since the Eric Garner, but I haven't been to any of the larger mass protests. But listen, I got to tell you, I think our country is in a really, really, really interesting place. I want to get everybody's take on it. As always, like Bill says, there's a seat for you here at the table. And I think this has to be a national conversation. I'm big on, and I think so is Bill, this ideal that this has to really be a national conversation. The only way we're going to fix it is by talking about it and working out our differences together. So join the conversation. We'll take for between right now until almost the end of the hour. We'll take your calls at 1-866-55-PRESS. We'll also take your tweets at BP Show. Let's play some clips on this, and then we'll talk about it. So the first clip that I want you guys to hear is a clip from Mayor de Blasio sort of going in on the media for quote unquote sensationalizing the protest.
What are you guys going to do? Are you going to keep dividing us? I'm not talking about every single one of you, but let's get real. Just in that question, 25,000 people marched down one of our streets a few days back. Absolutely peaceful. No chants like that. Peacefully calling for what they believed in as American citizens, and the NYPD protected them. And I told people at the time, I've said it repeatedly, I got calls from all over this country with admiration for the NYPD, for the way it protected people's democratic rights.
And, I agree with Mayor de Blasio here because I think we have to learn how to strike a balance. Now, let's put what we know to be true out there. And I think it's a question that haunts a lot of people. I think both if you're white, black, yellow, blue, purple, green, orange, magenta, the one question that haunts a lot of people, and it should, is would Eric Garner, would Mike Brown, would Tamar Rice, would any of those individuals still be alive today if they weren't African American? If they were white, would they be alive today? And I think the sad part is we all know the answer to that question, which brings you to where we are right now, right? There's clearly a division between where the police sort of sit and, the New York Police Department. I think all police, I wouldn't say all police because it's wrong to say all police here. And let me start with the disclaimer. It is the job, we need police in our community. right? We need police to keep our communities safe, but we also but also with that being said, we need a police force that is just, that is fair, and that engages community. That's literally the only way we're going to fix this situation. But what we have right now, and I'm sorry, and I'll say this, I think that what we've seen from some police officers is this double down. We're going to double down and say we've done nothing wrong, and I'm sorry. When you look at this Eric Garner video, and I hate to go back and sort of regurgitate this video, but you have to understand where the palpable anchor comes from. And this is not just African Americans out in the street protesting, y'all. This is gay people. This is white people. This is black people. I mean, during the major protest a couple of weeks ago, we had Jewish rabbis out there protesting against what they saw was a total and complete injustice in this country. You have a grand jury that watches a video of a guy being choked for just about 11 minutes saying, I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe. And yet still the police officers managed to walk. Right? And I over the Christmas break, and I think if you guys are home tomorrow and home this weekend celebrating New Year's Eve weekend, one of the documentaries you should watch, and if you've never seen it before, it was done by Ken Burns, and I think Ken Burns is if Ken Burns is listening, he is, I think, one of the best documentary directors, film directors there is out there. And he does a video about what they call the Central Park Five, which is this 5 young African American boys at the time, who were walking through Central Park, doing what kids do. I remember being a kid and throwing stones at cars, doing what kids do. And there was a Caucasian woman that was raped in Central Park. They accused these 5 boys of raping this woman, and they basically put them through this crazy interrogation, and they all ended up going to jail from 5 to 7 years and they never, ever, ever, ever committed the crime, right? They never committed the crime, and they walked. And as I was sitting there watching it over Christmas break with my brother, I was so reminiscent to me. I'm like, so those 5 individuals who did not commit the crime, there was no tape, there was no evidence, went to jail for 5 to 7 years. The police officer who choked this guy on tape walks. Now that's a juxtaposition. Now you put that in the mindset in the eyes of the African American community, and what you have, America, is what I call a critical breakdown, right? It's a justice system that only works for the chosen few and doesn't work for every American. And I think that's all that people are asking for. They're not asking for a justice system that sort of gives African Americans an advantage. They're asking for a justice system that is fair. Let's take this to a trial, not a grand jury. And I hate the people out there who say, oh, well, a grand jury is a trial. No, a grand jury is a secret jury behind closed doors that deliberates about a case. In all likelihoods, and I'm not a lawyer, but I know I'm smarter than the average guy, right? This idea that they don't hear both sides, they only hear from the prosecution. They don't hear from the defense. They don't hear they only hear what the prosecutors choose to present in the case. So if a prosecutor is hell bent on making sure that police don't get prosecuted, then he's not going to present all the right evidence. And we saw that in Ferguson, in St. Louis, where the McCullough, the prosecutor, indicated just a couple of days ago that, I don't really know, this witness, I just put this witness up on the stand to make sure that the jury know that people lie. That makes absolutely, positively no sense. So you have a prosecution that depends on a police department to present them with evidence, and there's a very close relationship, and I don't despise the close relationship. It makes sense. The job of the police is to arrest people who commit crimes. The job of the prosecutor to prosecute said crimes. There's probably a close relationship, which is why there should be a special prosecutor that deals with cases of police. But maybe that's just Richard, and maybe I'm crazy, right? But you put all that into play, and then you ask yourself the larger question. Is there a problem between police and the black and brown community? And the answer to that question is equivocal. Yes, there is a huge problem. There is absolutely a huge problem. And it's a problem that exists because no matter what happens, whether you're any black man will tell you you have the conversation with your dad or your mom or your uncle or your grandfather about what to do when the police show up. What to do, make sure you keep your hands on the steering wheel. Make sure you're not rude to the officer, right? So you automatically have this sort of deep down fear, and some of that fear is resentment or whatever it might be about the police. And then police meet you the opposite direction with saying they assume, because of the broken windows theory or whatever, what the hell ever, that African Americans have, I guess, a higher propensity to commit crime or whatever it might be. And what you have when you put that all into play is you have a really, 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 really sick and twisted system. And when we were in, we're going to go to break on this, and we're going to come back. I want to take your calls, 1-866-55-PRESS. Let's have a conversation about this, y'all. Or tweet me, and I'll read some tweets during the break, and we'll talk about them when we come back. But there was this young man who I met in Ferguson who said this. We were sitting there with the congressman and some other folks, and the congressman asked him, he talked about how, like, police threw him on top of the car and handcuffed him for no reason, committed no crime. And the congressman said, why didn't you report? And he's like, because in Jennings, in Jennings, St. Louis, or where I'm Jennings, I guess, Missouri, not too far from Ferguson, he said, this is what we're used to. We grew up with the police just badgering us, and so we're used to this. So why report it? I want to get your thoughts. Go ahead. Give us a call. 1-866-55-PRESS. We'll be right back after this break.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Tune into Free Speech TV for Democracy Now!, a national, independent, award-winning news program bringing you people and perspectives rarely seen on corporate media.
Grunt work. Love it, hate it, useful, not useful.
Necessary.
Our social entrepreneurs are people who have been on the front lines of social change. I've learned so much from talking with them. This is Cafe Impact, and I'm Jonathan Lewis.
I will say that I think is a challenge for anyone, especially the new workforce as they come in, is the ability to accept grunt work with grace.
The most boring, awful details are the most important elements of doing this work. From the way you save names in your Rolodex to the way you bank and you deposit checks. The truth is, this work isn't glamorous, it's rewarding. You don't go into this for the glamour, you go into it for the impact. And so it takes that determination to do the scut work to actually get anywhere.
It can be really challenging in a first job for someone who's coming out of finishing school to have the enthusiasm that they do to make the type of social impact that they've dreamed of. And now they're here in this first job, and all of a sudden they're shouldered with all this grunt work. And they don't understand, and they don't get it, and they're resentful.
Talk more about the power of answering phones.
Sure, I did that myself, took out the trash, cleaned offices when I had to, and it's all good. There's power in being a good team player and in being somebody who sometimes has to support other people's leadership before you get to have your own moment in the sun.
Is it hard to wait?
It is absolutely hard to wait, especially if you're an alpha female like I am.
I think grunt work can help a new employee build trust internally and teach them the nuances of how an organization is run so that they can have a real good sense of what HR is doing, what finance is doing, what all the other departments are, and that actually makes them a better employee in the long run.
So in my role on a daily basis, I literally can be looking at a new venture in software. We could be looking at a microfinance deal. I could be making coffee, taking out the trash, and riding a tractor on any given day.
Have you found people who thought it was demeaning that they were given this job, work in the front office and make the coffee when they graduated with all A's from this great university?
Yeah, people like that just don't last very long in our world. If your approach to life is that, you're so smart and you're such a fabulous entrepreneur that you can't understand why people aren't giving you opportunities, it's really hard to advance.
Tune in to Gay USA with hosts Ann Northrup and Andy Hum for in-depth coverage of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender news. Watch Gay USA every week, only on Free Speech TV.
At Earth Justice, we defend the environment in the courtroom. Join our fight. When you take a seat, you take a stand. Earth Justice, because the Earth needs a good lawyer. This is my
Seen on Free Speech TV and online on TawkrTV. This is the Bill Press Show.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Richard Fowler filling in for the one and only Bill Press, who's taking a well-needed vacation. And as Bill always says, there's a seat for you here at the table. And as we have this conversation about police, Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, whatever you want to call it, we want to make sure that you're part of the conversation. A couple tweets that came in over the break. One tweet comes from, wait, let me find it. There you go. Holly Tucker, who says, you know, you can't call, and I think she's right, Holly, thanks for the correction. So she says, you know, make sure you call it what it is. It was a non-indictment, not a verdict, and you're absolutely right. And then Don Griffin, who basically says, you know, he grew up in Boston, and when the city had a huge racial tensions, and James Brown saved the day. And thanks for listening, Don. We appreciate you. And now we'll take a key in Louisiana. Welcome to the show.
Yes, hello, sir. How are you? I'm a retired officer from New York. I used to work in Brooklyn North. I started off as a transit officer at East New York and Far Rockaway. And as I've been a police officer since 87 to 207.
Okay.
And I worked the street. I worked Livonia Avenue. I've been on the BMT, IND, everything. I've been on the streets in Brooklyn North and anti-crime units. So when I see people and I hear things will go on, my friends always ask me, why did they do this? Why did they do that? I said, I can't tell you why, because I'm not them. See, I was learned that you only pull your gun out. Your gun is somebody's sword. You only pull out your gun unless you mean to kill somebody.
I agree.
Most times you try to de-escalate a situation. And sometimes de-escalating means backing away. And I used to tell people, I said, you're a criminal. You'll be here tomorrow. I know where to find you. You got all your friends here? Fine. I'll be back with my friends. I got 30,000 people in blue. So you want to play, you can play. But I'll be back. You're going to be here because that's all you know.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And I think you're so right. I mean, I think that's the job. That's what you call good policing, this idea that I'm only going to harm you if I need to. I only pull out my gun if somebody is coming after me. And I think in both these situations, well, in the Eric Garner situation, there wasn't a gun. But, I mean, to choke somebody for 11 minutes, y'all, and then to say that, you know, the blood is on the hands of City Hall. I don't know about that one. We'll be right back after this break on the BP Show. Join the conversation, 1-866-55-PRESS. We'll talk about this for the next segment. I want to hear your thoughts. Let's have a national conversation, y'all.
This is the Bill Press Show.
This is my computer.
This is your computer. Let's go on the internet.
Let's go. Click it.
Yes.
Okay.
I cursor in between the R and the E. When I say done, I want you to just push the period.
She's gonna love me all over again.
That's it. Jamaica, here you go.
Here we go.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. And I did it by myself. Feel smarter.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. You know, but it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, you know, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
All right. I know this isn't any fun to talk about, but we should. Okay, so who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice.
And I'll try to get the generator going without any gas.
Oh, let's not forget the cell phones, which probably won't work.
Right.
And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
Well, I think we couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. You know, I followed your character since the first episode. I'm a big fan, big fan.
Thank you.
And listen, your storyline, it makes for incredible TV drama. Thing is, your drug use is very adult content. Too adult for the kids. So I'm gonna have to block you.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, have a good one.
You're a nice lady.
We tried to warn, it must not go on, it cannot be tolerated. That blood on the hands starts on the steps of City Hall in the office of the mayor.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to the Bill Press Show. Happy New Year's Eve, everybody. Sorry to end on such a somber note, but we're talking about sort of this friction that exists in the community, in our country is the better word, between police and, you know, the community. Now, those were the words of the head of the police union, the Benevolent Police Association in New York City, following the death of the two officers. Now, let me be very clear. But I think that it is really, really, really sad to see two officers who did nothing wrong, who were innocent, you know, sort of be killed and be, well, better yet, be murdered, right? It was wrong. It was awful. It was disgusting to watch. I think we can all agree there. And their lives matter just as much as Eric Garner's and Tamar Rice in Cleveland and Michael Brown in Ferguson. And all lives are, you know, equated. All the lives, it's just, life is life. There's a sanctity of life, to take a word from our pro-choice, our pro-life friends and colleagues, right? And, you know, I think, you know, I think that moment, that shot, the fact that those two officers were murdered, it speaks to the fact that as a country, and I think the fact that Eric Garner was shook, that we really need to have a conversation about this, right? We can't push this under the rug. You can't blame City Hall. And I don't blame de Blasio at all, because I think de Blasio, and during his press conference, I think it was probably one of the most frank press conferences and one of the most honest press conferences that we've seen from a New York mayor in a really long time, when he went out there and said, listen, raising my child, my African-American son, this is what we had to tell him. This is the reality. Yes, I happen to be a Caucasian man, but the reality is this is what I had to tell my son. This is what me and my wife had to deal with, and this is the reality for millions and millions of New Yorkers, and I would take that further, for millions and millions of Americans. And you know, and to sit there, for those out there who blame the peaceful protesters for the death of these two police officers, I think that's absurd, right? Because there's not, and I think, listen, there was an interesting piece I want to say it was in the Daily Caller, the Daily Beast, about those folks out there who blame, and a lot of it, let's talk about the politics on this for just a second. It's the very, very far right, and there's the sort of right wing are like, oh, it's the protesters' fault. And I say to all those folks out there, especially the Tea Party folks out there who hate the fact that when we go in on the Tea Party, we find the one Tea Party person who has the Confederate flag, or the one Tea Party person who has the picture of Obama as a monkey, and say that represents the Tea Party. I'm not in the Tea Party, so I don't know what represents the Tea Party because I don't go to their meetings. But it's not right for us to do that. But it's also not right for them to then isolate out of 60,000 people marching down New York City streets for you to isolate the one person that's saying, killer cops have to die, right? So, I think that goes both ways. I think the larger, broader movement, and I know these people, you could take my word for it, if you'd like, right? I know some of these people and some of these folks, these young people, really. This is a movement led and run by young people. Most of them are younger than me. So my 20th birthday is next week, right? That's it's real. It's young people who are saying we've had enough. We are so sick and tired of being sick and tired, and we're going to continue to protest, and we're going to continue to demand change. And listen, you got to give these young people props. Right? I mean, for the past we're almost 150 days, they have been consistently out there demanding America for their voices to be heard. Ike in Charlestown, South Carolina, how are you?
Hey, good morning. Yeah, I'm still trying to hunt down Peter Ogburn. I think I got close to him the other day. The Diamond Strip Club, they said some idiot was in there with a roll of quarters and nickels and dimes and making it rain. I figured that was Peter.
Yeah, it's got to be Peter.
Sounds just like Peter.
But listen, let's get serious. You ready? Number one. Let's take this back where it all belongs. We've got a proliferation of handguns and gun violence in this country that needs to be addressed. We also have a lack of mental health services, which this fellow that assassinated those 2 police officers was mentally ill, had a weapon he should have never had, and as a matter of fact, the violations on his record, he should have never been out of jail in the first place. Number 2, we need more civilian oversight on all these police departments. We can't leave it in the hands of somebody that's buddy-buddy that works with these cops day in and day out. He's more likely to protect the police than he is to protect the citizens. We need cameras on everything, on the police officers themselves and on the cars, and they need to be running. They do not need to have the ability to be able to turn them off at will. As a matter of fact, I'm a big advocate for putting some cameras on the boys up on Wall Street and put them on our politicians too. Okay. And lastly, in all honesty, if you look at the track record and all the people that have been killed by police, and all you really have to do is watch cops. It's not just black and white. It's not just black and Latino. It's the poor people out here. Yep. We get served a very harsh brand of justice, but when it comes down to the top end and these people at Wall Street and these other things that they do, they don't get nothing. And this inequality and justice is going to be a real boiling point, and I'm surprised it hadn't blown up before now. But that's the real answer to the problem. And lastly, make sure you do a heavy dose of mental testing and keep an eye on these police, because anybody with a gun is liable to get the God complex at any time and start acting like a bully. And that's the problem with guns.
I couldn't agree more, and I agree with you. And the only point where I think there's a little bit of friction is, so the question you have to ask yourself, right, so if we had body cameras, would that solve the problem? I mean, the Eric Garner death was on tape. But I think when you put all your pieces together, right, and you've got to put them all together, you create real solutions. And I think you're right. And we have a tweet from Margaret. And Margaret says, the hypocrisy level in the U.S. is suffocating. How can anyone deny the injustice that is blatantly in your face is inhumane? Margaret, I couldn't agree more. Ralph from Knoxville, how are you?
Pretty good. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
I stole my thunder. Everything he said, I agree with.
Thank you.
It boils down to training. It's like the confrontation out there in Missouri. That policeman and that young man that got killed. It turned from self-defense into, just as far as I'm concerned, murder. But until we let our system continue the way it is, we're going to keep on doing the same things. And our system it's messed up. As far as solving problems, is we build more prisons and throw people in prison. That solves the problem. I guess it gets them out. That sweeps it under the rug.
No, I think you're too right, Ralph. And I think also let's be real. And I know that a lot of us, it's uncomfortable for people to talk about it, but let's admit that there is racism that exists in our society, whether it be in our justice system, whether it be the judges on the bench, whether it's the police officers. And it goes both ways, right? Because there's also this sense that, you know, when you see in the black community, when you see a white cop, you automatically think the worst of them. So racism exists, and bias, that is the real problem here. It's not necessarily police, it's not the community, it's racism and bias that have sort of gotten us to this place that we're in right now. Paul in Fort Plain.
Good morning. I'm a 70-year-old Vietnam veteran. I have seen so much racism in my lifetime, and I'm white, by the way, seen so much racism in my lifetime through the Attica deals and police killings over the years, and I think it's about time this is going on, these demonstrations and such. And I don't understand how people can't get the fact that if you're a police officer, you got a bulletproof vest on, you got a stun gun, you got a gun that's a real gun, by the way, it's not a toy. You've got a car to hide behind. You got backup always behind you and on the way. Okay, every one of these murders, there was backup there, for crying out loud, when this stuff was going on. What are these cops doing? Don't they learn self-defense on how to take care of themselves other than shoot somebody? I've been in bar fights, for crying out loud. Somebody charges me. I'm not going to, just because I got a gun on me, I'm not going to shoot them dead. I'm going to take care of the situation in other ways, especially if I know the guy's unarmed. You know, this is what shocks me, and I don't see why people just don't get this fact, that it...
All right, thank you, Paul. We appreciate you. How about Gene in Cleveland?
Yes, one thing I'm noticing is that when they have a shooting, if the police officer shoots and kills a black kid, the first thing that they do is test the victim and for alcohol and drugs. How come the police officers don't get tested for alcohol and drugs? Because if an RTA bus driver in Cleveland has an accident, they have to go in immediately for a drug and alcohol test.
I completely agree there, Gene. And I think the problem that you see, and every time this happened in the Eric Garner case, it happened in the Mike Brown case. I'm surprised they didn't try doing the Tamar Rice case, but he was 12, so they probably couldn't get away with it. But the idea that the victim becomes becomes this sort of beast or this creature that was trying to take us out, right? The victim becomes the person that's sort of the assailant all the time. And the Eric Garner case is like, oh, well, he had asthma and he was overweight and that's why he died. Hey, listen, if he wasn't choked to death, he would still have asthma and be overweight, but he wouldn't be dead.
You know, what's so shocking about the Tamar Rice situation is the 911 call. The caller explicitly says,
I think the gun is fake.
Exactly. Like, why would you come in like the SWAT team if they think it's just a toy gun?
Right. And I mean, there's just so much wrong. I mean, and we'll see what happens in this Tamar Rice case. It's going to go to a grand jury. And, you know, at this rate, I have no confidence in our grand jury system, whether it be in Cleveland, California, or Alaska for that matter, right? And I guarantee you, though, once again, we'll see another non-indictment, right? Because they'll be like, oh, the police officers are acting in self-defense. But the video, I mean, that's just my thing, right? And what I would really, and I think what really has to happen, and I think we've seen this, like I can't remember their name right now, but the African American National Council of Police, they've sort of said, you know, we've got to take a step back and we've got to look internally and see what the issues are here, because there's clearly a problem. We're gonna continue talking about that in the next hour. Keep your calls coming, keep your tweets coming. We'll deal with them all. I promise I'll take them. We'll be right back after this break. We're going to be joined with David Jackson from the USA Today. So stay with us. We'll be right back on the Bill Press Show.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Tune into Free Speech TV for Democracy Now!, a national, independent, award-winning news program bringing you people and perspectives rarely seen on corporate media.
I'm the retired bishop with the Episcopal Church as the bishop for all chaplains in federal service. I read that there was a group of people that represented a sense of injustice that I had. We'd lost Zuccotti. I mean, there was a kind of a hope that maybe Trinity Church would be gracious and give refuge. We picked this day where we would gather and demonstrate that Trinity was closing its ears to what was happening. We marched around the block, and I realized that, my goodness, they're carrying a ladder. And I thought, well, this is the moment. You could feel a spiritual presence. You could feel a certain something. And then the cops came in. It got brutal.
I'm with you right here. Robin, I'm here.
The church needed, in this moment in history, to stand alongside of these protesters. The truth of Christ is found in the pews, is found in the institutional church, but it is also found on the streets. It's found in the honesty and the integrity, the insistence of people that you find in Occupy Wall Street.
Tune in to Gay USA with hosts Ann Northrup and Andy Hum for in-depth coverage of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender news. Watch Gay USA every week, only on Free Speech TV.
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
President Obama, are you fracking kidding me?
Reopen the EPA studies.
In Texas, Wyoming, and Pennsylvania.
Fracking pollutes our oceans.
Fracking poisons our water.
Fracking makes climate change worse.
Fracking relies on toxic chemicals that cause cancer. Ban fracking now.
Ban fracking now.
Go on. Ban it.
Ban fracking now.
Please.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
And we're back here on The Bill Press Show. How are you doing on this fine New Year's Eve? No, that's New Year's Eve. It's not the New Year's Eve. We're just a couple hours away. I don't know, maybe about, we give it 18 hours from the new year. So hopefully you're probably in your bed, drinking your coffee, and you're joining us here. And Bill, as Bill always says, there's a seat for you here at the table. And we want to continue the conversation. Just shifting gears just a little bit. And listen, for all those folks calling about the police stuff, please continue calling in. 1-866-55-PRESS. We'll have a conversation about that, or tweet us at BP Show. I promise you, I read all your tweets, and the folks who are tweeting will tell you that I also I respond to most of them when I can during the break. But also speaking about that, in the new year, we'll be going into a new Congress. So we're joined by David Jackson from the USA Today. Welcome to the show, David.
Okay, thanks, Richard.
So listen, let's do a little, who's up, who's down, big wins, big losses, big plays in 14, and what's to come in 15. So, in your opinion, what was the biggest move by the president? I guess successful by the president in 14.
I'd do a tie between immigration and Cuba, the two things he's done since the election. I mean, immigration could basically give legal status to as many as 5 million people in the United States. It has a lot of ramifications on a lot of different things, including political things. And also the normalization with Cuba, that's going to be quite interesting, too. We're basically redeveloping a relationship with a country that we haven't dealt with for more than 50 years, and that's going to have a lot of ramifications as well.
And biggest moves and biggest plays by the Congress in 14?
By the Congress, I think basically it's the Republicans winning control of the Senate. Now they have the entire Congress, so a lot of these, what they call jobs bills, the ones that have been bottled up by the Democratic Senate, they're not going to be approved by Congress, and they're going to go to the president, where he will either sign them or veto them, and it sets up, I think, a year of confrontation between an all-Republican Congress and the Democratic president.
David, that's a perfect segue. So, getting into 2015, I mean, what should folks at home be looking to. And I want to throw in there. Obviously, everybody thought he was going to be a total lame duck president. But the economic forecast and the numbers, and Janet Yellen's press conference sort of indicates that the economy is going in a favorable direction, which the president will take a lot of the credit for. So he has some bargaining chips here. But what does it look like as we get into this new Congress in 2015?
I just think a lot of stalemate, quite frankly. I'm pretty much a pessimist. I think the first thing to look for, the very first thing out of the box will be Keystone. I think you can look for the Republican House and the Republican Senate to pass a bill that would require construction of the Keystone oil pipeline from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. And they basically would force President Obama to either veto that or approve of it and basically back the oil pipeline. And that'll be a good tip-off as to how things are going to operate between the two.
Now,
I think it's possible they could get together on a free trade deal maybe down the line and maybe some tax reform, but those are going to be too big lifts that the politics may not permit.
So here's the thing. I got in some trouble yesterday, and I'll own it. I did. Right here on the Bill Press Show, because I think I woke up the green machine, and they took me on about Keystone. But I want to ask you, from a reporter journalistic landscape, do you think the president can get something for Keystone? Like, if he gives Keystone, he can get something in return?
In a normal political environment, I would say yes, but I'm not sure this is a normal political environment. So there might be. I think there's a lot of behind-the-scenes maneuvering that's going to go on. Particularly, to me, the key relationship in that is Mitch McConnell, the new leader of the Republican Senate, and Vice President Biden. They go way back. They served in the Senate for decades together. They know each other, and they respect each other. And I think the kind of thing you're talking about, you can maybe see Biden and McConnell making some backroom deals, but they'll stay in the backroom. I don't think a lot of people will know about them if they go on. So, one thing Obama will get if he signs off on Keystone is he'll get a better relationship with Canada, because Prime Minister up there, Prime Minister Harper, this is a very important project for him, and he's very anxious to see construction begin. So I guess that's one thing you can say the president would get out of supporting Keystone, that is better relations with our neighbor to the north.
So, and I'm also, I tell you, you're just, this New Year's Eve, David, you're just winning on all fronts, because I'm also like the biggest Joe Biden fan ever. And, I think you're 100% right on this. I think that, the real star of 2015 could be Joe Biden.
I think so too, but I know that when he if you recall, he came to the rescue. He basically, I think helped the U.S. avoid default back. I guess it was August of maybe 11 when we were on the brink of defaulting. And Biden and McConnell put that deal together, and I think that some people in the White House kind of resented the high profile Biden took on that. So I think Biden will be heavily involved in talking to these guys, but I don't think it's going to be a very publicized role. So
so that's there goes my next question. Do you think that this White House, because they're, more and more, I think the president's going to have to lean to the left. Is he going to let Joe Biden be Joe Biden?
I don't think he wants. I think they feel like Biden's more effective behind the scenes. And of course, there'll always be Bidenism, because every time the vice president talks, people look for stuff to write about. You know how that goes.
He's great. I mean,
I think he'll stay in the news that way. But in terms of getting things done, I look for Biden to take more of a low key role.
A low key role, David. Thank you so much for being with us on this fine New Year's Eve. Happy New Year to you, sir.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you, and stay out of trouble.
I'll try my best. We'll be right back on the Bill Press Show after this break. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Bill Press Show.
What gets you into college? Good SAT scores? High GPA? Lots of extracurriculars?
Sure, but what you really need is money.
If you don't have the cash, you'll need a loan.
And we mean huge student loans, because the cost of college has risen 1,000% in the last 30 years.
This means big money for the banks that collect fees and interest.
Now, millions of young people are starting their adult lives with an average of $29,000 of loans on their backs.
Altogether, we're talking $1.2 trillion in student debt.
And more people are finding it impossible to pay them back. Welcome to the student debt crisis.
The increasing demand for higher education and cuts to state funding gave colleges a huge incentive to keep inflating prices.
I graduated about a year ago, currently in $35,000 of debt.
I am in debt about like $25,000.
I owe $23,000.
I owe over $50,000 in student loans.
38.8 million Americans owe money on a student loan.
And the biggest names in banking are making huge profits off the booming student loan industry. Sallie Mae, the largest provider of private student loans, made $949 million last year.
They only give you about 6 months to look for a job. You have to start paying back the loan. It's very pressuring, especially nowadays. It's very hard to find a job.
Over half of the students graduating in 2012 could not find a decent paying job.
They either had low-wage jobs or unpaid internships or were unemployed altogether.
So you can't make the payments. You start incurring late fees, which makes the loan even harder to pay off.
And it stays with you for years, even decades.
Right now, a third of the people who started repaying their loans are delinquent or in default.
That's 13.7 million people, more than the populations of Chicago, New York, and San Francisco combined.
Worse, it's not just the borrowers who are in trouble. Many loans require co-signers.
So if the student is unable to pay, that co-signer, a father, a mother, or a grandparent, is now on the hook.
Even a grandparent's Social Security benefits can be garnished to pay the loan.
We should have an answer to this. If you get really behind in your car payment or your credit cards, you can file for bankruptcy.
But Congress has made it nearly impossible to discharge student loans through bankruptcy.
Big institutions make big profits while students try to make ends meet under crushing debt.
Is this how we want our education system to work?
The whole point of going to college is to get the career you want, but lately that's been discouraged because no one can afford school. You get a job just to pay off your student loans.
We need higher education, not higher debt.
Sign up to end the student debt crisis at higherednotdebt.org.
This is the Bill Press Show.
And we're back on the Bill Press Show. Richard Fowler here, filling in for the one and only Bill Press on this fine New Year's Eve. I'm taking you into the new year here on the Bill Press Show. As I promised you last week. See, there you go. As I promised you yesterday, we'll get to New Year's Eve. We might be missing a door and a couple wheels and a headlight. But we're going to get there. We will get there, America. In the next hour, we're going to continue to take your calls about the community and the police and so much more. So continue to join the conversation. 1-866-55-PRESS is a seat for you here at the table. And we're also going to be talking about Scalise, or the lack thereof Scalise. We'll figure this all out at the next hour of the Bill Press Show. See you then.
This is the Bill Press Show.
All right. I know this isn't any fun to talk about, but we should. Okay. So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice.
And I'll try to get the generator going without any gas.
Oh, let's not forget the cell phones, which probably won't work.
Right.
And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
Well, I think we couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
You wouldn't let money just blow out of your house. So when your AC or heater is on, make sure the doors, windows, and fireplace flue are shut tight. If you're headed out, turn down the AC or lower the heat by 10 degrees. And always keep your water heater set at 120. A little bit of common sense goes a long way. Get more great tips at energysaver.gov.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
Just this month, my bill was like $138.
Even at one phone call a week cost me $40 to $50 every month.
I am living on a fixed income of SSI, so this is really a great hardship. Families are being punished. When they incarcerate their children, they incarcerate the whole family.
In 2011, the Media Action Grassroots Network, Working Narratives, and Prison Legal News founded the Campaign for Prison Phone Justice, an effort to call on the FCC to address the cost of interstate phone calls. The campaign mobilized prisoners to send hundreds of letters. Advocates and families filled out postcards, met with elected officials, and signed petitions. Partnerships were formed across the political spectrum and with groups in the criminal justice, civil rights, and public interest community. The film distribution company Participant Media and director Ava DuVernay joined the fight through a social action campaign tied to the release of the feature film Middle of Nowhere. In an effort to push the FCC to act, the campaign hosted a historic rally outside of the Federal Communications Commission where for the first time, families of prisoners, elected officials, civil rights and faith leaders came together to call for an end to predatory phone rates.
We're all held captive when predatory phone companies gouge our families.
My son has been incarcerated now for over 10 years, and my husband estimates that in the time we spent over $25,000 on prison phone calls.
My hero's not yours, you probably arrested them. Your schools probably neglected them. They spawn thoughts, you probably infected them. Feed us what you feed us, you can lay us next to them. FBI call it major crimes. Babies making babies cry.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
At Earth Justice, we defend the environment in the courtroom. Join our fight. When you take a seat, you take a stand. Earth Justice, because the Earth needs a good lawyer.
Two anti-government, self-described revolutionaries have shot up a pizza restaurant as well as a Walmart in Las Vegas.
The internationally syndicated political series, The David Pakman Show, provides progressive talk, analysis, and interviews with the nation's youngest radio and television host, David Pakman. Find out more and catch up on all the latest episodes by visiting our website at freespeech.org.
Broadcasting around the nation, on your radio, on your TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show. Yes, you're tuned in and dialed in and YouTubed in and televisioned in to The Bill Press Show. I know. I look nothing like Bill Press, but we were separated at birth. We are, fraternal twins. No, I'm kidding. He's on vacation. Richard Fowler from The Richard Fowler Show here filling in for the one and only Bill Press. It's 6 after the hour, so if you're planning on getting somewhere on this New Year's Eve at the top of the hour, you are 6 minutes and about 47 seconds late. Sorry, but at least you're listening to us, which makes life a little bit better. As always, this show is nothing without the amazing team. We have A Squared in the control booth, Elisa and Alicia, and then Cyprian Bolden on the cameras.
Good morning.
Good morning, and welcome to another hour of this fine show. So last hour, we had a really good sort of conversation, dialogue, I think is the right word, right? Going on about what is indeed the problem that exists between police violence and the larger community, and I want to throw another piece into this. So, I think we were starting to get there, and I think listen, you guys out there give me more life than life can give itself, right? And this ideal that there are some serious issues. One, we have a gun control problem, right? And I think we could all agree on that. First, the two officers that were shot, they shouldn't have been shot because that gentleman shouldn't have had a gun. Number one, and number two, we need to do a better job. The proliferation of guns in this country is, problem numero uno. Problem numero dos is that there's not enough citizen oversight of our police departments. So yesterday, Mayor de Blasio, in his eve of New Year's Eve, spent about 2 hours meeting with the head of all the police unions in the city, to sort of figure out what to do. And this is all sort of stemming from the back turn, I guess is what you would call it, during the funeral of Officer Ramos. The police pretty much turned their back on de Blasio, which, I found to be really, 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 really disrespectful, right? Because I don't think this mayor has done anything wrong. I mean, obviously, you have your boy Rudy Giuliani out there because he's just trying as hard as possible to get in front of a camera to sort of make a situation out of no situation, saying that de Blasio was wrong. But I just think de Blasio was being honest. And he was. I mean, de Blasio's son happens to be an African-American man because he's married to an African-American woman, or half African-American man, but half African-American is African-American. If nobody knows that that's de Blasio's son, besides the fact that you've seen him on TV with de Blasio, right? And he makes and the argument that he made is that, listen, the reason why these folks are out here now 100 and some odd days strong, pushing, and this is not only African-Americans, these are brown people, these are yellow people, these are gay people, straight people, transgendered folks. We're going to hear from them later on in the show. They're out there because they understand that we indeed have a serious problem. It's not a black problem. It's not a white problem. It's not a Ferguson problem or a Cleveland problem or a New York City problem. It's an American problem. And so because of all of that, he was saying, hey, listen, we need to work on fixing this. And my son and me and my wife talk about how we deal with this with our son, who happens to be a black man. And so he met with the unions for 2 hours to sort of air grievances. There was no statement from de Blasio, but the unions didn't really think that it went as good as it should have went. And don't get me wrong, I'm all about labor. You guys know I love labor. Big labor person. But I think this is one of these things that are beyond labor. This is a larger, broader issue than, people having the right to collectively bargain. This is an issue about how it just wasn't neither of the decisions, the non-indictments, it wasn't on level. And that's what bothers me about this. We're going to continue taking your calls, join the conversation, but right now it's time for your Full Court Press.
This is the Full Court Press.
Just some other stories making news today. on the light of gun control, since you did just bring it up, a very sad story about a young mother being shot by her toddler son. The 29-year-old mother and her 2-year-old son were shopping at a Walmart store in Hayden, Idaho, right near Spokane, Washington. Lieutenant Stu Miller says the toddler reached into his mom's purse and pulled out her concealed weapon. She was permitted to carry, discharged it, striking his mother. She died in the Walmart. Police say it was an accident. The boy was playing with the gun. No charges will be filed, but a very, very sad story indeed.
Indeed.
And specifically on gun control in this country.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no words.
I know. It being New Year's Eve, a lot of people statistically actually use this day to propose.
That is true.
It's a big night. I bet a lot of women out there might be hoping for the best. A lot of couples deciding whether or not this may be the day to make that plunge. BuzzFeed actually reports on some of the creative ways to pop the question. One of them being hiding a ring in a box of macaroons. Who would have thunk it?
That is exactly what my best friend who they got married last year. That's what he did. He hid it in a chocolate truffle.
Oh, see, that's very good. Just make sure you don't eat it too quickly. Also, nowadays with all the creative things you can make online, having a fortune cookie made to pop the question. Also, putting the question inside a mug as someone's drinking something. And also another idea people have been doing is using a photo booth. So you're in there taking a picture together, and then you pop out the ring, and then you see it in the picture. So kind of creative things to think about if you've been hit by Cupid's arrow.
Yeah, I think we're all waiting to be hit by Cupid's arrow. It hasn't hit me yet.
Just wait, Richard. 2015's around the corner.
Oh, boy.
Good news for those suffering from rheumatoid arthritis. Researchers are testing out a new treatment involving no pills whatsoever. The device is surgically inserted into the patient's neck, where it rests against a nerve. Patients turn on the device for 3 minutes a day using a magnet. It sends an electrical impulse that reduces the number of immune cells that travel to joints, causing painful inflammation. One of the patients, Monique Robrick, could hardly move a year ago, even with the strongest drugs, is now completely pain-free after only a few weeks using the device. The study was done in Amsterdam, so it will, of course, take some time to get completely available to the public. They are estimating it might take up to a decade, but very, very big news for those suffering from rheumatoid arthritis, which is a very big problem in this country and internationally.
Huge problem. Thank you so much. That was your full court press. Clearing some of your tweets here. So NC Nomad says, in Texas after the Civil War, coalitions formed of poor whites, freed slaves, and Mexicans. Rich whites pitted them against each other. And that was indeed why, we had a problem. And I think you're right. I think that, so beyond the racism that exists, there also is this underlying bed of poverty and economic inequality. So you have economic inequality, you have poverty, you then have racism, you have underfunded schools, right? You have dilapidated communities, you have a lack of jobs, and you put it in a big mixing bowl, and you have what we have right now. Joe, and I think it's Natchez? Now, where are you calling from, Joe? Michigan.
No, Natchez.
Natchez.
Mississippi.
Oh, Mississippi. I'm sorry. That was my fault. How are you, Joe?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
What's your thought here, Joe? Do you have a thought?
Do what? My sign?
Yeah. What do you want to say to the audience, Joe?
That the problem with the policemen and the black kids are the policemen don't get paid enough money.
Okay.
If they got paid enough, then smarter people would compete for their jobs, and the problem would take care of itself.
All right, Joe. I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with you on that one because I don't think pay structure would determine whether or not we still have I don't think pay structure solves racism or bias, but that's just me personally. Jeff, Phoenix, Arizona. How are you?
Doing. Yes.
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Great. In the Garner case, the reason the district attorney offered the officers immunity straight right off the bat was because he didn't have to offer them anything. He had a video showing exactly what happened. It was just that what he saw was the police officers used two moves that have been banned. One was the chokehold, and the other one was when they piled onto him. What killed Garner was not the compression of the windpipe. It was that his lungs could not expand. That's why he was able to say, I can't breathe, as he was expelling air, trying to get in air. It was an accidental death. But the district attorney, it should have been taken out of the district attorney's hands because he saw that, and that's why he offered them immunity right the fact that they could not be prosecuted at any other date when it was revealed through an autopsy that it was asphyxiation due to that his chest couldn't expand. And both those moves are banned by NYPD. The chokehold was banned in 1995, and I forgot when the other one was banned, not too long ago, early part of 2000, because several people have already died from that.
I hear you, Jeff. I think you're right. I think you're 100% right. I think, the video was there, and they knew the video was there, and, they clearly choked this guy and piled onto him. And that, resulted in his death, and it was untimely and it was wrong. And I think to add to that, and I want to throw this out there to the audience. So folks who don't know, now that Representative Grimm has resigned, one of the top contenders in the Republican Party to take his seat is the same prosecutor who basically created the non-indictment situation in the Eric Garner case. Just throwing that out there. We're just throwing more flames in this fire, I guess. Robert in Lawrence, South Carolina, how are you?
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
One of the major problems of the races in this state, or the racism, is that so many white people are led to believe that blacks are inherently dishonest. In other words, let me see if I can be specific. If you have a man in shackles, you have to have an excuse to have him in shackles. In other words, if you make a slave out of a man, you got to have a reason. Ordinarily, people won't accept you just having a man in shackles just because you can. He has got to have done something wrong.
Okay, so what you're saying? You're saying that the white police officers view African Americans, well, not all, but some police officers view African Americans as dishonest, so they could put them in shackles?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Let me make a comment. A number of years ago, I was in the local town, and an older black woman called out to a younger black man, wanted to know where he had been for some time. And he said he'd been in jail, and I wondered why he wasn't ashamed to say that he was in jail and why she didn't chastise him for having been in jail. He was born to it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Not quite, but we appreciate your call. Misty, how are you?
Good morning, Richard. Good to see you. Good to hear you, too.
Thank you, Misty. Happy New Year to you.
And you. I'm originally from the South, so I just wanted to say that as a former school teacher, I think that we need to see more people of color on the media doing good things, because I think people don't think that, and they initially think negative things and about other people. And I think if that would happen, it would change the moral thoughts of America about us being a melting pot.
I think you're so right, Misty. And when you say that, the words that come to mind for me is so about 2 years ago at the March on Washington, the anniversary of the March, 15th anniversary, Myrlie Evers spoke, the wife of slain civil rights leader Medgar Evers. And she said growing up in the 60s, we never saw African Americans on television and in the media. And she's like, being able to turn on my television and turn on my radio and hear and see young African Americans on TV makes a huge difference, because it helps change culture and ideal. Right. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very, very blessed to be where I'm at. And I'm grateful. I'm beyond grateful to do what I do. And the reason why I continue to do it is because it helps slowly but surely change culture, because they realize that, some people have this mixed, weird view because that's all they've known. Right. They haven't seen anything outside that, and if you know better, you do better. And so I think if you see educated young people, young African Americans in the media space sort of talking about the issues, it really helps sort of change culture. So I'm happy to be blessed to be in the space. And thank you so much for calling, Misty. We appreciate you. And I think that's one of the solutions. I think it's really about changing conversations, changing stereotypes, and changing how we see things. We're going to go to break because we got to pay some bills here on the show, but we will come back with your calls and so much more on the Bill Press Show. Join the conversation, 1-866-55-PRESS, or tweet us at BP Show or at Richard A. Fowler. We want to hear from you. We'll be right back.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Tune into Free Speech TV for Democracy Now!, a national, independent, award-winning news program bringing you people and perspectives rarely seen on corporate media.
Grunt work. Love it, hate it, useful, not useful.
Necessary.
Our social entrepreneurs are people who have been on the front lines of social change. I've learned so much from talking with them. This is Cafe Impact, and I'm Jonathan Lewis.
I will say that I think is a challenge for anyone, especially the new workforce as they come in, is the ability to accept grunt work with grace.
The most boring, awful details are the most important elements of doing this work. From the way you save names in your Rolodex to the way you bank and you deposit checks. The truth is, this work isn't glamorous, it's rewarding. You don't go into this for the glamour, you go into it for the impact. And so it takes that determination to do the scut work to actually get anywhere.
It can be really challenging in a first job for someone who's coming out of finishing school to have the enthusiasm that they do to make the type of social impact that they've dreamed of. And now they're here in this first job and all of a sudden they're shouldered with all this grunt work. And they don't understand and they don't get it and they're resentful.
Talk more about the power of answering phones.
Sure, I did that myself, took out the trash, cleaned offices when I had to, and it's all good. There's power in being a good team player and in being somebody who sometimes has to support other people's leadership before you get to have your own moment in the sun.
Is it hard to wait?
It is absolutely hard to wait, especially if you're an alpha female like I am.
I think grunt work can help a new employee build trust internally and teach them the nuances of how an organization is run so that they can have a real good sense of what HR is doing, what finance is doing, what all the other departments are, and that actually makes them a better employee in the long run.
So in my role on a daily basis, I literally can be looking at a new venture in software. We could be looking at a microfinance deal. I could be making coffee, taking out the trash, and riding a tractor on any given day.
Have you found people who thought it was demeaning that they were given this job, work in the front office and make the coffee when they graduated with all A's from this great university?
Yeah, people like that just don't last very long in our world. If your approach to life is that, you're so smart and you're such a fabulous entrepreneur that you can't understand why people aren't giving you opportunities, it's really hard to advance.
Tune in to Gay USA with hosts Ann Northrup and Andy Hum for in-depth coverage of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender news. Watch Gay USA every week, only on Free Speech TV.
At Earth Justice, we defend the environment in the courtroom. Join our fight. When you take a seat, you take a stand. Earth Justice, because the Earth needs a good lawyer.
Seen on Free Speech TV and online on TawkrTV. This is the Bill Press Show.
And we're back here on the Bill Press Show. As always, as Bill would say, there's a seat for you here at the table. So join the conference, 1-866-55-PRESS. We wanted to hear back from Misty in Glen Ellen, California. My producers told me that you had some interesting things to say. Misty, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. What I wanted to say is that we have to be the change. Get out those video cameras, people. Just go to the cable shows, go to the internet, show your children, your family members, doing positive things in the community. Don't wait for the news to do it. and go to the internet, go to Google, the cable shows, and create your own shows, and be the change that President Obama and President Kennedy has encouraged us to be.
No, I think you're so right on that, and I think it's easy to do, Miss D, and everybody should be their own journalist. And I think we're seeing that, and that's the reason why these, for the past 100 and some odd days, these protests these peaceful protests have such an impact in this country, because it's the independent journalists that are really the one pushing the story. The news media Ferguson was a story that the news media missed, and they went backwards because the independent journalists, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, right, Vine, Ustream, those are the ones, that's where the story was coming from. That's where the protests are being seen and the tear gas is being seen, and that's what sort of caused the whole country to sort of pause and be like, wait a second, we got a serious problem on our hands. Anita, San Antonio, how are you?
Yeah, I don't think there's ever going to be a change in these police departments like the NYPD unless they'll even admit there's a problem. You've got this union guy, and I'm pro-union, but he's giving unions a bad name when he goes out there and blames the protesters, when he won't even admit that something may have gone wrong, that maybe things need to change.
No, I hear you, Anita, and I think that there's some truth to that, right? And there's the truth that, but I think I'm a little bit more optimistic. I think we can change the system. It's just going to take constant pressure and a willingness to make change. And I think we're at this tipping point.
But is there a willingness to make change? That's the problem I think there is right now. Until from the top, and it stops at the top with this union leader, I think. Until they need to get rid of him or find somebody who is willing to change.
But listen, power never yields willingly. But the arc of history sort of bends toward justice, if I could take two quotes and sort of put them together. So, yeah, sometimes I don't think that Strom Thurmond wanted change, right, when we passed the Civil Rights Act. But we got change, and I think that's the difference, because the constant pressure from African Americans and from the community and from the larger community is what's going to be the one to create the real change. Consistent pressure. And that's what these protests are. And to some extent, the question we have to ask ourselves is, how disgusted are we going to have to get as a nation to really see change? That's what it took for the Civil Rights Act to happen. The disgust of people being hosed, what happened on this Edmunds Pettus Bridge in Selma. How disgusted are we going to continue to get until we really say, it's time for us to change things, whether the people in charge like it or not. It's time for real change. And it starts in the states. It's not a thing we can't do it here in Washington. It starts in state capitals, in city halls, in school boards. That's where the change happens. We'll be right back on the Bill Press Show. Join the conversation at 1-866-55-PRESS or at BP Show. We'll be talking about your tweets when we get back.
This is the Bill Press Show.
So this is my computer.
This is your computer. Let's go on the internet.
Let's go. Click it.
Yes.
Okay.
I cursor in between the R and the E. Pressing down, I want you to just push the period.
She's gonna love me all over again.
That's it. Jamaica, here you go.
Here we go.
Good job.
Thank you. And I did it by myself. Feel smarter.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
All right. I know this isn't any fun to talk about, but we should. Okay. So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice.
And I'll try to get the generator going without any gas.
Oh, let's not forget the cell phones, which probably won't work.
Right.
And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
Well, I think we couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. You know, I followed your character since the first episode. I'm a big fan. Big fan.
Thank you.
And listen, your storyline, it makes for incredible TV drama. Thing is, your drug use is very adult content. Too adult for the kids. So I'm gonna have to block you.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, have a good one.
You're a nice lady.
Connect with The Bill Press Show on Twitter. Follow us at BP Show and tweet using the hashtag WatchingBP. This is The Bill Press Show.
And we're back on The Bill Press Show. Thank you guys for all your calls this morning on issues of police and community and all things ugh. And also in news of all things ugh. We're joined by our friend Betty. Kamisar?
Kamisar, yes.
Kamisar. Oh, I was close. I'm awful at pronouncing last names. It's my Achilles heel. Ben Kamisar from The Hill. We love The Hill here at The Bill Press Show. We like The Hill generally speaking. And we happen to be on The Hill. So it's perfect that we like the newspaper The Hill and we're on The Hill. It all works out, Ben. So adding to, I think, our issue, the divisions in this country is this story, which I think we were talking during the break, wouldn't be a news story if there wasn't such a news vacuum that we're in right now. This whole Steve Scalise, who's getting ready to be the number 3, the whip, the House whip, who spoke, I guess, in 2002, if I'm correct. Yeah.
Yes.
For the David Duke group, Euro, which is a group that fights for white civil rights, which is basically, as the Southern Law Poverty Center says, is, a hate group, or AAA, the KKK. Now, there's been some rumbling on it. And, there's been some folks, Charles Krauthammer yesterday said, it would have been a good idea for him to step down, but he's not going to step down. And that's concerning. Now, Charles Krauthammer is conservative can be. And so now, John Boehner seems to be sort of standing by his man here. Nancy Pelosi is saying the opposite. How much, do you think this story really has legs?
Well, it depends. I think what's really going to be interesting here is whether we see a pattern emerge. If this is just a one-off thing where, obviously you can't, there's certainly a gravity to what speaking in front of a white supremacist organization. Obviously, it's not something that you want to do or that was right to do. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if this is just a one-off thing and he's telling the truth and he said, I didn't know that I didn't know about this group. I just was trying to trumpet my my tax plan, and ultimately I spoke to all comers. If that's the way that it is, I think ultimately this could die out, and then he could be okay. But if you see a sort of a pattern emerge, and people are going to start looking for that pattern, sort of akin to what happened with Trent Lott in 2002, actually, same year, when he was into the Senate Majority Leader. He had to step down after making some comments at Strom Thurmond's birthday party, who ran for president in 1948 on a segregationist platform, because of this pattern that really developed. And I think if you start seeing something like that with Majority Whip Scalise, that could be where he gets into a lot of trouble.
So, I mean, here's the question, though. I mean, the question, I think, for me is, if this story has legs and it lasts into the new year and lasts into the new Congress, the blowback and the pressure, right? Especially because the Republican Party, as we already know, they got diversity issues. They know they have diversity issues, right? So diversity is a big, problem for them. People think that the party is quote unquote racist. Not saying that I do, but people think that. People also think that the party had, they don't like Latinos. You have people like Steve Stockman and Louis Gohmert making comments about, walking across the border with cantaloupe thighs. And so you have all these other pieces. And now, but what they're really good at doing is not allowing them to penetrate leadership after the Trent Lott situation. Mm-hmm. But now it has penetrated leadership. And so I think they're in a really, really tricky space.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I was saying about the pattern developing. I mean, obviously, because these comments touch on race, this isn't a scandal like, the Michael Grimm situation, which obviously a felony, not a good situation to be in. But the race aspect sort of adds another issue for them. I mean, this is potential to do damage to a brand that really needs some help with minorities coming into 2016. I mean, the Republican Party is touting the fact that this new majority is going to be a little bit more diverse. They have they're elected the first black female Republican lawmaker, Mia Love, and I heard from Mia Love, her campaign staff, yesterday, and they said, it's tough to comment, but right now they've had an incredible relationship with the Majority Whip so far. So far, she's standing by, and really, when you take a look at who's going to be coming in this new class, they really want to tout this diversity. So anything that can get off message, obviously, isn't a good sign.
Yeah, and I think you're right? So yeah, they have some major wins, and I think, Democrats should take notice, and I've said this already. I've said this very publicly after the election. You have Mia Love in Utah. You have now there's 2 African-American elected senators. One is black, one is white. But this is the first, I want to say this is the first African-American senator elected below the Mason-Dixon line since Reconstruction, in Tim Scott. And so they have all these, so they're trying their best. They've picked their couple lucky chickens. And now they're in a situation where a Steve Scalise can really ruin it for them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and this is basically the next 2 years for Republicans is sort of seen as sort of dress rehearsal for 2016. This is what the country could look like if we have control. I mean, I would be hard pressed to see a Republican president in 2016 with the Senate flipping back to. I mean, that would be. It could happen, but
unlikely.
It's unlikely. Ultimately, they're going to want to preach this, this unity, everyone together, and ultimately try and reach out to these groups that helped, some minority groups, women, groups that helped elect President Obama in 2008 and 2012. So anything that can dump them off message there would be substantial. And also the other thing we talk about women is Speaker Boehner also has to deal with another representative, Blake Farenthold down in Texas, who's facing a discrimination lawsuit and some lewd allegations there about sexual comments. So those two issues, obviously Scalise more because it's closer to home in the leadership, but those two issues, if Boehner can't clamp down on those and sort of get that out of the caucus and get it off of the front page of the newspapers, he'll have some issues.
Well, and I got to tell you, I think what I would have wanted to see from John Boehner is more boldness on this one, right? I'll get on the president because I think sometimes the president's not as bold as he should be, but I think Boehner should have said, this is unacceptable. Come on, Steve. You knew when you walked in that this was when you walked in the door and you saw, I'm pretty sure they were selling, Confederate flags. I've been to a lot of conferences, not that I've been to this one, but you sell memorabilia that represents the community that you're, espousing and represent, right? There's some point in time where you knew this was going on. Right. And clearly this blogger uncovered this and he's like, oh, well, I didn't know that I just think that answer to me seems lackluster. And I think sometimes somebody's going to take one for the team. And I think Boehner should have said, you're stepping down. and we're going to bring somebody else in just because we know we have diversity issues, and doubling down with you could be trouble.
Yeah, I think with, obviously, Scalise came into the whip position just a couple of months ago when former Majority Leader Eric Cantor stepped down.
Right.
And Scalise's idea, sort of the role that he played was to reach out to the base, the less established, more base members of the party, the ones that support the base. And, I think when this sort of started coming out, it's a calculated risk. Are you going to instantly kick out the guy that you just elevated to help you reach out to this base? Or, are you going to hedge on the side that this isn't a pattern, this isn't going to be something that we're going to hear more about, and try and keep him because he actually is a really important piece for the leadership and helping them sort of keep everyone in line, keep that unity that they're looking for, and sort of change that narrative of the Republican Party over the next 2 years. And the hope is that he won't distract from that narrative.
Right, and I think to add to that, even folks like Sean Hannity, who came out too, he did an interview with Breitbart, and he was like, I think that Scalise John Boehner should step down, and Scalise should step down. So, I think that there seems to be a sense on both sides of the aisle that this has risen to a level where it's just disgusting. And we've got to figure out how to deal with it as a party. And I just think it could be damaging because folks like me, I will own it, right, are going to go on air, and this is what we're going to point to. This is why people think that the Republican Party, they're like, well, the Republican Party is not racist. And I'm like, well, okay, you might not be racist, but you have members of your leadership who spoke at the KKK convention. And listen, I'll be the first one to tell you that I think the KKK is just as awful as the Black Panther Party. And so, that's my 2 cents.
No, it's one of those difficult things to sort of sort out within. So the extremism on both sides is always difficult to sort out. And, with 435 members in Congress, you're bound to have someone that, especially people who've been around for a while, maybe when attitudes in this country were different, you're bound to have people who, you had on the Democratic side, Robert Byrd was involved with the KKK back a couple.
Yeah, he was a grand wizard.
And so ultimately, it's just this difficult balance of how do you deal with that extremism? And I think the calculation for Boehner here is that ultimately this isn't going to be a pattern.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. We're gonna go to break in just a bit, but before we do that, I want to ask you. So you cover all things politics at the Hill. Who is your biggest winner in 2014?
Biggest winner in 2014. That's tough. I think for me it'd be tough to say anyone out. Even without this, outside of Boehner. And maybe probably even Mitch McConnell, just because, you took a look at, obviously it was going to be a bad election for the Democrats, especially on the Senate side. But to see such massive sweeps across the board, it puts them in a really good position, puts the Republican Party in a really good position to make their claim to their policies and their agenda for the next 2 years. Obviously, that comes with a double-edged sword, and they can't use the idea of dysfunction and say, we could have done this if. Now the ball's in their court, and they have to do something about it, and they have to make progress. But ultimately, I think pretty much coming into the end of the year, things could not have gone much better for Mitch McConnell.
And the biggest loser of 14.
That's tough. I don't want to just say Harry Reid. Because that's just obviously the same side of the coin.
We're breaking news here on the Bill Press Show this morning.
No, I'm not sure about that, honestly. You might have to get back to me on that one.
Oh, got to get back to you. Have the break to think about it. Listen, folks, we've got to pay some bills. It doesn't mean you have to go anywhere. All you got to do is get another cup of coffee, pull up a chair at the table, and join the conversation at BP Show. 1-866-55-PRESS, or at Richard A. Follow. We'll take your tweets during the break. We'll be right back on the BP Show. See you later.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Tune into Free Speech TV for Democracy Now!, a national, independent, award-winning news program bringing you people and perspectives rarely seen on corporate media.
I'm the retired bishop with the Episcopal Church as the bishop for all chaplains in federal service. I read that there was a group of people that represented a sense of injustice that I had. We'd lost Zuccotti. There was a kind of a hope that maybe Trinity Church would be gracious and give refuge. We expect this day where we would gather and demonstrate that Trinity was closing its ears to what was happening. We marched around the block, and I realized that, my goodness, they're carrying a ladder. And I thought, well, this is the moment. You could feel a spiritual presence. You could feel a certain something. And then the cops came in. It got brutal.
Yeah, I'm with you right here. Robin, I'm here.
The church needed, in this moment in history, to stand alongside of these protesters. The truth of Christ is found in the pews, is found in the institutional church, but it is also found on the streets. It's found in the honesty and the integrity, the insistence of people that you find in Occupy Wall Street.
Tune in to Gay USA with hosts Ann Northrup and Andy Hum for in-depth coverage of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender news. Watch Gay USA every week, only on Free Speech TV.
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
President Obama, are you fracking kidding me?
Reopen the EPA studies.
In Texas, Wyoming, and Pennsylvania.
Fracking pollutes our oceans.
Fracking poisons our water.
Fracking makes climate change worse.
Fracking relies on toxic chemicals that cause cancer.
Ban fracking now.
Ban fracking now.
Go on. Ban it.
Ban fracking now.
Please.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
And we're back here on The Bill Press Show, joined by the one and only Ben. No, I got this. Ben Kamisar.
Close.
Kamisar. Oh, come on. America. Ben Kamisar from the Hill. Richard Fowler's having a losing New Year's Eve today, clearly. But we're winning because you're with us here on The Bill Press Show. So the question I have for you as we go into 2015, we're just about, I don't know, maybe, I keep changing the number, 18 hours away. My math is awful.
And no one will check you on it.
Nobody will check me on it. I'm pretty sure they'll tweet me on it.
Yeah.
Who will be the biggest winners and losers of 2015 in your projections?
Politically, I
Yes.
assume. Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see sort of what happens in this new Congress with the Republican majority. I think if they, sort of we were talking about before the break, if they can push their agenda and they can make some real strides in framing themselves as an alternative to President Obama, but more importantly, an alternative that people want to have, I think they can really come out of 2015 as winners, and that would really make all of the Republican field sort of the ones that are likely to do well in 2016. Those are the ones that could get a bump from that. But on the other side of the aisle, I think the interesting thing you see here with Elizabeth Warren could be sort of an interesting year for her as well. She hasn't said whether or not she's going to run for president, but either way, she's been a really vocal voice in the progressive wing of the party. She railed against the most recent shutdown bill and seemed to get a lot of buzz about that. She's trying to go against one of the president's picks for Treasury, and I mean that's someone she's even willing to fight against someone on her own side. And I think if she can sort of keep pushing that progressive message, and that causes some of the politicians like Hillary Clinton to take notice, and if maybe move, maybe even if she's not going to be in 2016, her views might be represented more than that in 2016.
All right, and who loses in 2015?
Well, I think the interesting thing is this might sort of be a hedge, but I think the person that's bound to be either the biggest winner or the biggest loser is going to be the president, because this is going to be the last year, really, that with undivided attention on the president. When the world's in 2016, everyone's going to be talking about the elections, and obviously the president can get a lot done, but that's not where the focus is going to be. And the question is going to be, what can he do in this year with a hostile Congress?
And what are his options?
I mean, he could take it, like he said, take out the pen and veto and continue sort of working within the bounds that he can with executive orders, executive actions, and trying to change things for what he wants. And even not necessarily the biggest, most publicized ways. He can do them sort of smaller scale, different agency interpretations, directions that way. I mean, there's also really a chance for some type of compromise here, because obviously the Republicans have as much to gain with legislating as the Democrats do now, because both of them are trying to make a stake for the future. So I think if he can find either common ground with the Republicans and not give up and sort of maybe change the climate, which is unlikely, that would be a big win. Or if he just continues to get through his message and get through his policies, either through executive actions or something like that, he could come out on top. But on the flip side, if a Republican side emerges that is a big foil to the president, and people start draining on, after 6.5, 7 years of the president, people want to change, then it could be a pretty bad year for him as well.
So,
you know what? I'm sorry. We just have to interject here. Speaking of winners and losers, we have someone on Twitter talking about your sweater again today, Richard.
I saw that.
Yesterday, unfortunately, Basquiat518 tweeted us at BP Show
that she hated my sweater.
Talking about how she hated the sweater yesterday, but today, Richard, you are the winner. She says you're wearing a much better sweater.
I responded to her. I said, I appreciate that. I really tried hard. I was thinking about her this morning, and I'm like, what am I going to wear? I thought yesterday's sweater was quite fine, but I'm happy she likes this one today.
I didn't know we were going to be on camera. I had a little shirt with a little bit of a stain right on my right above the lapel, and I ended up changing, which I'm now feeling very good about right now.
Yeah, you should. You should feel very good because, I got reamed by Batzarat for my sweater last week. So now I have the ultimate question for you. I've asked everybody this because, I'm the biggest Joe Biden fan. What is in the cards? What is in your tarot cards for Joe in 2015?
Well, I don't see anywhere else that he can really go besides running for president. I mean, it's either going to be president or bust for him. And ultimately, I think that's going to get dealt behind closed doors between two people that have known each other for a long time, have served together, been friends. I don't see how they both go in together. It just doesn't make sense to me. Even if I think that fire might be there for Vice President Biden, but I just don't know. I think it's probably, he might know it's a losing proposition if you're running against Hillary.
See, I just don't think it's a losing maybe I'm the only one. Me and A Squared think it's a winning proposition, possibly.
Well, I mean, there's definitely a way for it to work out. It's just you're coming from such a coming from a position of weakness when you look at the polls for sure. And the question is this going to be you're going to be remembered by the last thing you do? Is the last thing that you're going to do be run for president with such risk, or ultimately bow out after 8 years of being a relatively well-liked vice president?
Well, here's the thing. I think that if the president moves to the right, if the president stays center, right, which I think is not going to happen, right, then I think Biden has a shot because if the president moves to the left, Biden is sort of with him on the left, and Hillary Clinton then becomes to the right of the president and gives sort of Biden this window to sort of pick up on this Elizabeth Warren thing. Anyway, Ben, we've got to pay some bills and we got to take a break. Thank you so much for being with us. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you as well.
We loved his input. We'll be right back after this break. Don't go anywhere, y'all.
This is the Bill Press Show.
You wouldn't let money just blow out of your house. So when your AC or heater is on, make sure the doors, windows, and fireplace flue are shut tight. If you're headed out, turn down the AC or lower the heat by 10 degrees. And always keep your water heater set at 120. A little bit of common sense goes a long way. Get more great tips at energysaver.gov.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
A few years ago, plastic bag waste in our city came to a tipping point. It was clear we had a bag problem. My department was tasked to reduce plastic bag consumption. We needed to come up with ways to change human behavior. So we asked ourselves,
should I get back?
What do people really hate?
Yep.
Getting punched in the stomach. Preliminary studies showed that the consequences weren't severe enough to warrant behavioral change.
Actually, can I get that double bagged?
So we thought, what do people hate more than getting punched in the stomach? Kissing Helga.
Hey, big boy.
People didn't find her so offensive after all, so we had to get creative.
How many bags? Okay, now, pour this ice water down your pants.
We tried everything.
Eat the threat. Defuse this bomb.
Even fighting your clone. After blowing through millions of dollars of government funds on research, I came up with a brilliant idea.
Why don't we just charge 5 cents per bag?
That's a stupid idea.
Would you like a bag?
Yes.
5 cents a bag.
5 cents? 5 cents? Do I still have the option of getting punched?
Honestly, I don't know how everyone else missed it.
Why don't you just get a reusable bag?
Connect with The Bill Press Show on Twitter. Follow us at BP Show and tweet using the hashtag WatchingBP. This is The Bill Press Show.
And we're back here on The Bill Press Show. Richard Fowler filling in for Bill Press. I want to deal with one of your tweets. SK Dixon says the original Black Panther Party wasn't a race-based hate group. Hopefully you meant the new Black Panther Party. Yes, I did. I meant the new Black Panther Party. Sorry, I didn't say new before Black Panther. But yes, the new Black Panther Party is classified by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate group. And, hey, it is one. I'm not saying they've done as much destruction and evil as the KKK, but a hate group is a hate group is a hate group. And listen, the next hour is just a couple minutes away, so join us in the next hour. We'll still be here. Hopefully you will get that cup of coffee and continue the conversation. Call us 1-866-55-PRESS or tweet us at BP Show. We appreciate you. See you next hour.
This is The Bill Press Show.
West here reporting from Houston, Texas for Climate Desk. Now, one of the biggest uncertainties in climate science right now is the role of clouds. What better way to work that part out than flying right through them? That's what NASA scientists aboard this airplane think. Welcome to NASA's biggest airborne laboratory. You're coming with us today on an 8-hour NASA flight mission.
When you read these big IPCC climate assessments, what's the biggest uncertainty? There's two, right? The role of aerosols and clouds. Clouds is probably bigger than aerosols.
That is a piece of a puzzle that right now we are missing.
You can't get the models right if you don't understand the chemistry and the process.
Now we're being told we've got to get on. The doors are about to shut, so let's go aboard. Every time you turn on the weather, every time you hear a climate change prediction, that information has to come from somewhere. And it starts by getting sucked out of the air from planes like this.
So this mission is to try to understand
the emissions from the surface, so mostly biogenic emissions, so from trees and other plants.
Right now we're flying to our very first part of this experiment on the DC-8. Over Arkansas, there's a particularly pungent bouquet of emissions that scientists are interested in measuring.
Well, these emissions lead to both aerosols and to molecules that both destroy and create ozone. So these are very important things to understand for climate studies.
How it will manifest itself, it will be in more accurate and more reliable predictions.
So what we're doing is taking a series of flyovers, each at a different level of the atmosphere, scooping up those emissions, testing them, and hopefully scientists are going to see exactly what's in this column of air all the way up.
The data that we collect in one flight can keep busy 60 scientists and students for 3 years, 4 years. We're still studying data from data collected 20 years ago.
In fact, this particular mission today is its most heavily equipped in its nearly 30 years of service. Each one of these consoles here is a specially equipped scientific instrument designed to collect all sorts of different data in real time.
And this instrument here tracks the sun.
We're looking at mist chambers. They're used to strip soluble gases.
This black line is the CO2. It's about 390 ppm right now.
We're putting these filters in the bags that we've got the aerosols that we trapped out of a certain amount of air. And so we're sampling up here about 150 liters a minute.
That ultimately flows back into the operational models. It flows back into what goes on TV every day.
Anyway, I got to get this sample going.
You do it. It's a busy man at work. We can't let him rest. Well, get this. We've just spent 2 hours crisscrossing this one cloud formation. In, back out again, back in again.
Then they grow, and we track them as long as we can, and then we let it go.
Even one cloud can hold a host of answers to the mysteries of climate change.
The patterns of, where the clouds are, what type of clouds we see, what kind of weather systems they're associated with it, that'll all be shifting in a shifting climate, in a world with climate change.
Then the big spark is this, is when we actually get the meat on the grill. And then it will be some time to process it.
The most important issue on this planet right now is to protect and conserve biodiversity in the world's oceans. And I don't think people realize just how intimate our connection is with the oceans themselves. Not only do they provide the very foundation of life and control our weather, but life just simply could not exist without a healthy ocean. The real problem, though, is apathy. It's all out of sight. It's all out of mind, and people don't even think about it. But it doesn't matter whether you live in Peoria or on the coast. The fact is, whatever happens in the ocean affects all life forms on the planet Earth. If the oceans die, then civilization collapses. We all die. We cannot live on this planet without the oceans. This is, in fact, not the planet Earth. It's the planet ocean, but because we're a land-dwelling species, we refer to it as Earth. But it is the planet ocean, and the oceans are the heart and the foundation of all life on the planet.
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
President Obama, are you fracking kidding me?
Reopen the EPA studies.
In Texas, Wyoming, and Pennsylvania.
Fracking pollutes our oceans.
Fracking poisons our water.
Fracking makes climate change worse.
Fracking relies on toxic chemicals that cause cancer.
Ban fracking now.
Ban fracking now.
Go on. Ban it.
Ban fracking now.
Please.
Two anti-government, self-described revolutionaries have shot up a pizza restaurant as well as a Walmart in Las Vegas.
The internationally syndicated political series, The David Pakman Show, provides progressive talk, analysis, and interviews with the nation's youngest radio and television host, David Pakman. Find out more and catch up on all the latest episodes by visiting our website at freespeech.org.
Broadcasting around the nation, on your radio, on your TV, and online. This is the Bill Press Show.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. It is 6 minutes after the hour. You're listening to the Bill Press Show. Richard Fowler here, filling in for Bill Press. I know, we look alike and sound alike, but we are just fraternal twins separated at birth. And I am here, and he is on vacation. Listen, join the conversation. There's always a seat for you here at the table. 1-866-55-PRESS. Or tweet us at BP Show. We're taking all your tweets. I promise I read them all. We read them all here, and then we talk about them. But right now,
we even change our wardrobe based off of them.
We do. We change our wardrobe based off of them. Right now, we're joined by the one and only Stephen Shepard from Politico. Hey, welcome.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Happy New Year.
You too.
So, Stephen, so you cover campaigns and elections for Politico. So, 2015 is the year where we figure out what happens in 2016.
Yeah, no, you think of it as the off year, but the off year leading into a presidential cycle is one of the busiest years, particularly. We'll have to see how the 2016 calendar plays out. You know, Iowa wants to go in late January or early February. They've always wanted to go in that spot, but the past few cycles, they've been pushed earlier and earlier by states that try to jump the line. In 2008, I think it was January 3rd. So basically Christmas and New Year's in Des Moines. This year, they hope, and the two party committees hope that doesn't happen. They've hoped that they've punished these early states enough that we're looking at our first nominating contest in late January or early February, which means that basically by the summer of this year, by July and August, the presidential campaign is really fully underway. So it's going to be a busy 2015. We're going to see people start to get in to the race in January and February, and that phase of the race will stretch until July or so, and then the field should be pretty much set. You saw Rick Perry try to get in late in 2012. That didn't work for him. I think candidates are going to take that as a lesson that the spring is really their time to get in.
So all right, let's make some wagers here. Who's the first big name to announce, and when?
I think you're going to see you have someone like Rick Perry who thinks he got in too late. He's going to be out of a job in January when Greg Abbott takes over as governor of Texas. I think he's going to be one of the earlier folks to get in. And look, on the Democratic side, Martin O'Malley is going to wait until spring. The Washington Post had that story over the weekend. Hillary Clinton's going to have to decide pretty quickly. She's got until maybe March or so before Democrats start to get a little nervous about what she's going to do. It'll be reassuring to them that if she rolls out her campaign in February or March.
So you think she's in February or March? So do you think the vice president's going to announce? I've been asked this question, everybody. I feel like people at home are like, "Oh God, is he talking about Joe Biden again?"
By all outward accounts, he's not going to challenge Hillary Clinton. I think he is fully prepared and excited about the idea of running. If she doesn't run, if she decides, it seems unlikely, but if she decides not to give it a go, he certainly spent a lot of time in Iowa and New Hampshire behind the scenes, helping out candidates for local office there. You saw him campaigning for New Hampshire's two Democratic members of Congress, one of whom won, one of whom lost a lot this past year. I think he also campaigned for Bruce Braley in the Iowa Senate race. He's doing all the things you need to do except talk about and position himself to bring on the staff to challenge Hillary Clinton. I think he's waiting in the wings, but he's unlikely to do it if she does.
So do you think that she's basically, in your opinion, the basically glorified nominee?
Yeah, the other people that we're talking about, Biden, Elizabeth Warren, just are really unlikely to run if Hillary Clinton does decide to run, but are Democrats' best hope if she doesn't, and really only hope if she doesn't.
So here's the question. I always ask this because in 2008, I want to say we felt the same way. Everybody like, this is Hillary Clinton's, opportunity. This is Hillary Clinton's chance. And then she lost it.
Yeah, thinking back to this point, 06, 07, by this point, we sort of knew that Obama was giving it a serious thought, and he ended up announcing in January or February of 2007. We knew John Edwards was out there. He had been on the vice presidential ticket in 2004. We knew he was ambitious. But Hillary Clinton was the favorite. She was at 30-40% in the polls. Now she's at 65% in the polls now. She's in a much it's easy to say that, but the reality is she's in a much stronger position, and Democrats don't have the same bench that they did beyond her this time in 2006, 2007.
How does Hillary tackle the Elizabeth, and I hate to say the Elizabeth Warren wing because I think they were there before Elizabeth, but now she's sort of brought them out of the shadows. How does she tackle this anti-Wall Street, anti-big like establishment? I would argue the folks who are dealing with this, we talked about it earlier in the show, like, the Black Lives Matter group of folks. How does she tackle all those moving pieces who are not necessarily part of the Democratic Party, but they're part of the Progressive Party, if the Progressives had a party, and they're also critical for any victory that she could possibly pull off?
Yeah, it's going to be certainly a tightrope. There are all these competing things for her to balance. President Obama's approval rating is in the 40s. How much does she want to be seen as a third Obama term? The extent of someone from the left challenging her in the primary is going to be a big factor in pushing her one direction or the other. I think you're going to see, if it isn't someone serious, if Martin O'Malley, for example, fails to gain traction in the first few months of the campaign, then she might feel more comfortable distancing herself from some of those and not embracing the values and positions of that wing of the Democratic Party to position herself better for the general election. On the other hand, the louder and sort of more influential those folks are in the summer of 2015, the more she's going to be forced to bring them into the fold and potentially, damage her standing in a general election in the process.
But, I think with that being said, I think that, as a nation, we have seemed to, while I hate to say right or left because I don't think it's like one of those right or left sort of, it's not on the right or left prism, but we seem to have become a more populist country, whether it's Tea Party populism or Elizabeth Warren populism. There is a sense of populism that I think both parties, in my mind at least, and you can tell me your thoughts in 2016, whichever candidate can be more populist, I think that's the candidate that wins.
Yeah. Look at what's going on in the country right now. You have pretty solid economic growth since the recession in 2008. You have fairly low unemployment. You have, things seem to be getting better, particularly economically, which is what voters say is the most important thing when they decide sort of the mood of the country. And yet, between 60 and 70% of Americans think the country's off on the wrong track. Right. Folks don't feel like these things that are happening that seem to be good are helping them.
It's not hitting Main Street.
Right. And that is sort of really manifesting itself on both sides in different ways. You talked about the Tea Party on the right, and you talked about sort of the Warren wing or progressive wing on the left. Both the Democratic and Republican nominees are going to have to, presidential nominees in 2016, if this mood is still pervading, they're going to have to find a way to embrace that message without turning off too many of the people in the middle.
Right, and I think, and for me at least, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but if it's this like Jeb Bush, Hillary Clinton, fight to the finish, neither of them, to me, seem to be able to embrace this populist message. I think Jeb Bush will do awful with the Tea Party populism on the right. I think Hillary's going to have a lot of work to do decent amongst the populism on the left. And so you sort of have the center of the country, which I don't know if it's enough to, win.
Well, historically, it almost has been. Republicans, for all the talk about the Tea Party and their more conservative wing, they've sort of nominated the establishment candidate every time.
That is true.
Obviously, the dynamic this year, we don't know what it's going to be. We don't know if Jeb Bush is going to run. We don't know if...
he has created an exploratory committee.
Well, he's created a leadership PAC.
That too.
So he still has the ability to step back from that. But he has frozen the sort of those donors and those supporters in place in case he does decide to run. But, we don't know what the dynamic is going to be in that primary, whether or not this is the year that conservatives can win that. We seem to have expected it in 2012. This idea that, well, Romney, he can't crack 25% in the polls. It's either it's Santorum and then it's Gingrich and then it's somebody new every week. This is a sign he can't win. Well, he won.
So who's the Republican in 2016 or in 2015? I guess we'll figure out who is this year's Romney.
If Jeb Bush decides to do it, it is his turn. And Republicans have a history of nominating the guy whose turn it was. It was Romney ran in 2008 and lost. It was his turn in 2012. McCain ran in 2000 and lost. It was his turn in 2008. They have a history of doing that. It would be sort of Jeb's turn. He's passed in years in cycles past, and now he seems to be more serious about it. But at the same time, is this the year that conservatives can finally gang up and unite behind one candidate who is acceptable to the majority of the Republican primary electorate? I don't know. I'm kind of skeptical of that.
Hey, listen, I hear you. I think that it's definitely a tough one. It is definitely a tough one for the Democratic Party going into this upcoming debacle. You're staying with us. We got to pay some bills. So that's exactly what we're going to do. But it doesn't mean you have to go anywhere. You can listen to the lovely commercials. And while you're doing that, you can get your cup of coffee, get your newspaper. We're heading into the final stretch of the show, this New Year's Eve, the final show of the year. And we won't do it, and we can't do it without you. So stay with us. We'll be right back after this break. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Tune into Free Speech TV for Democracy Now!, a national, independent, award-winning news program bringing you people and perspectives rarely seen on corporate media.
Grunt work. Love it, hate it, useful, not useful.
Necessary.
Our social entrepreneurs are people who have been on the front lines of social change. I've learned so much from talking with them. This is Cafe Impact, and I'm Jonathan Lewis.
I will say that I think is a challenge for anyone, especially the new workforce as they come in, is the ability to accept grunt work with grace.
The most boring, awful details are the most important elements of doing this work. From the way you save names in your Rolodex to the way you bank and you deposit checks. The truth is, this work isn't glamorous, it's rewarding. You don't go into this for the glamour, you go into it for the impact. And so it takes that determination to do the scut work to actually get anywhere.
It can be really challenging in a first job for someone who's coming out of finishing school to have the enthusiasm that they do to make the type of social impact that they've dreamed of. And now they're here in this first job and all of a sudden they're shouldered with all this grunt work. And they don't understand and they don't get it and they're resentful.
Talk more about the power of answering phones.
Sure, I did that myself, took out the trash, cleaned offices when I had to, and it's all good. There's power in being a good team player and in being somebody who sometimes has to support other people's leadership before you get to have your own moment in the sun.
Is it hard to wait?
It is absolutely hard to wait, especially if you're an alpha female like I am.
I think grunt work can help a new employee build trust internally and teach them the nuances of how an organization is run so that they can have a real good sense of what HR is doing, what finance is doing, what all the other departments are, and that actually makes them a better employee in the long run.
So in my role on a daily basis, I literally can be looking at a new venture in software. We could be looking at a microfinance deal. I could be making coffee, taking out the trash, and riding a tractor on any given day.
Have you found people who thought it was demeaning that they were given this job, work in the front office and make the coffee when they graduated with all A's from this great university. And,
yeah, people like that just don't last very long in our world. If your approach to life is that, you're so smart and you're such a fabulous entrepreneur that you can't understand why people aren't giving you opportunities, it's really hard to advance.
Tune in to Gay USA with hosts Ann Northrup and Andy Hum for in-depth coverage of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender news. Watch Gay USA every week, only on Free Speech TV.
At Earth Justice, we defend the environment in the courtroom. Join our fight. When you take a seat, you take a stand. Earth Justice, because the Earth needs a good lawyer.
Seen on Free Speech TV and online on TawkrTV. This is the Bill Press Show.
And we're back on the Bill Press Show with Stephen Shepard from Politico. Stephen, how are you?
I'm doing well.
So, we're going into 2015. I think folks at home want to know, I want to know, what should we be looking for? What are some big dates and times, some mile markers that we need to look for as we go into this new year in just under, I guess, 18 hours. I don't even know what the clock says. I should look at a clock and figure out exactly how long it is.
I think the countdown clock. I think it's time for the countdown clock.
Yeah,
you don't have to wait till the Dick Clark show comes on to have the countdown clock going. But here's what I'm looking for, basically starting next week. And Bill would appreciate this if he was here. I want to know what Barbara Boxer is going to do. Barbara Boxer is up for re-election in 2016. She has only about $1 million in the bank. If she's going to run in California, she's going to have to spend $35 million in that race, roughly.
So you're saying
the indications are she has said that she's going to go home over the holidays, decide if she wants to run for another term. Well, the holidays are just about up. That countdown clock is at 15 hours. No. So the holidays are almost up. What is she going to do? Is she going to run for re-election? If she does, it basically freezes all those Democrats like Gavin Newsom and like Kamala Harris who are stuck because Jerry Brown and Barbara Boxer and Dianne Feinstein, who are all pushing 80 at this point, are blocking any path to sort of higher office for these folks. Or does she decide to retire, and then who jumps in early? If you're Newsom and Harris, are you more interested in maybe running it for governor in 2018 when Jerry Brown retires? Dianne Feinstein might retire in 2018. Do you wait for that, or do you jump in now? And the jockeying there, that is the first thing I'm looking for. And I think, based on what Boxer has said, I think we're going to get an answer in the first few weeks of the year.
Here's the thing. I hear that, and I think you might be right. I think Boxer retires. I think she's going to retire. I actually think she's going to pick her successor. Just knowing, just watching Senator Boxer from a distance for the past 10 years of her career since I've been in Washington, she seems to me somebody that will pick her successor. She'll take her little box that she stands on because she's short, and she'll pick her successor. And I think if she's going to pick a successor, she's picking Kamala Harris.
The trouble with that is California, over the past...
They don't like that.
Well, no. Over the past 5 years, they implemented this new election system there. They have, rather than separate Democratic and Republican primaries, now everybody runs in the spring all together, and the top two candidates then advance to the general election. And you know what? If they're not able to whittle down the Democratic field, you could see a situation where there's 8 or 9 Democrats, 6 of whom are sort of serious, whether they're members of Congress or whether they're statewide office holders like Newsom and Harris, and maybe 1 or 2 Republicans, and you could see some weird things happen. So the extent to which she's going to be able to do that, I think, is kind of limited. It's going to be, you would have to have enough people look at her endorsement and her support as a sign that they shouldn't run. That Gavin Newsom says, well, Boxer's behind Harris, I'm not going to run. I'm going to wait until 2018 for governor or for the other Senate seat. So that is what, I mean, this is one of the things that I think people are going to have to decide early to see how these fields develop. So really, by March 1st, I think we're going to have a pretty good idea what the California Senate race looks like, and that could be the most expensive race on the map just because it's California.
No, I hear you. And there's a presidential. The campaigns are going to have to spend money. The primaries are going to have to spend money there as well. What else is on the map? What else is on the calendar for you?
Well, we have a couple other possible Senate retirements. Senate retirements usually come in January and February. It takes a lot of infrastructure and money to build a Senate campaign if you're not an incumbent, so you have to get at. Parties want, Mitch McConnell wants all these Republicans who might not run again, like a Richard Burr in North Carolina, Dan Coates in Indiana. He wants to know right away.
Chuck Grassley
in Iowa will be, I think, 82 or 83 on Election Day. Mitch McConnell and Roger Wicker, the chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, they want to know right away. On the Democratic side, really, there's Harry Reid, who has said he's running again, but how much does he enjoy being in the minority? Barbara Mikulski here in Maryland will be 80 on Election Day.
But Babs ain't going anywhere anytime soon.
Well, she was just chairwoman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. How does she like now being in the minority, losing her clout? There's, similar to California, there's a backlog of Democrats looking to move up in that state.
In that state? I mean, because I know I have my inclinations of who will run. Who are you thinking?
The most ambitious Democrat sort of on the map, and he's pretty new, is Representative John Delaney, who represents the 6th District. It takes in some of Montgomery County, but all of Western Maryland. I think he's probably more likely to decide to run against Larry Hogan for governor in 2018. There's a number of members of Congress. John Sarbanes, who certainly is Sarbanes in a Senate seat in Maryland is not unusual. There's Dutch Reppersberger. There's Chris Van Hollen, who also...
Don't forget Rawlings Blake.
And the mayor of Baltimore, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, is certainly someone who's been on the national map in a way that her predecessor, Sheila Dixon, who was thrown out of office for that gift card scandal, has not. She's been involved a lot with the DNC, going to a lot of meetings.
She's she's the secretary of the party, I want to say, or she's something in the. She's one of the.
Yes, she's in party leadership, so she's certainly interested in playing a larger role than just mayor of Baltimore.
All right, what else? Which other races should we be watching out for in 2015?
Well, this one's a little bit farther down the ballot, but on February 24th, we have the Chicago mayoral election.
That is true. Chuy Garcia versus Rahm Emanuel.
Yeah, and in that race, a lot like some other states that we've talked about, they have a runoff system. So Rahm Emanuel would need the majority of the vote on February 24th. Otherwise, we go to a runoff in April. That runoff could be expensive, could be ugly. Unions, particularly teachers' union, would very much love there to be a runoff that allows them to play and hammer Rahm Emanuel and try to... Look, you're not going to be able to spend against Rahm Emanuel and get him to change his positions or to soften. That's not who Rahm Emanuel is. So, we're going to have to watch to see how the vote goes on February 24th there.
Well, Stephen Shepard, I'm pretty sure Bill will have you back, and we'll see what happens on February 24th. And we'll also see what happens in the 2015 year. Happy New Year to you, sir.
Happy New Year to you, too.
Listen, we'll be right back after this break. Don't go anywhere. The last 30 minutes of the Bill Press Show, the final show of the year, is coming back at you. We'll be right back after this break.
This is the Bill Press Show.
This is my computer.
This is your computer. Let's go on the internet.
Let's go. Click it.
Yes.
Okay.
I cursor in between the R and the E. Pressing dot, I want you to just push the period.
She's gonna love me all over again.
That's it. Jamaica, here you go.
Here we go.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. And I did it by myself. Feel smarter.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
All right. I know this isn't any fun to talk about, but we should. Okay. So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice.
And I'll try to get the generator going without any gas.
Oh, let's not forget the cell phones, which probably won't work.
Right.
And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
Well, I think we couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. You know, I followed your character since the first episode. I'm a big fan. Big fan.
Thank you.
And listen, your storyline, it makes for incredible TV drama. Thing is, your drug use is very adult content. Too adult for the kids. So I'm gonna have to block you.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, have a good one.
You're a nice lady.
Connect with The Bill Press Show on Twitter. Follow us at BP Show and tweet using the hashtag WatchingBP. This is The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show. This is Richard Fowler filling in for Bill Press on the final half an hour of the final show of the year. 15 hours, 26 minutes, and 37 seconds. I finally got a clock going. Till
we
the
are
2015
counting down here.
Year, and you know what? Like I promised you guys yesterday when I filled in, we're going to get there. We might get there with one headlight and 3 wheels. I think we're doing pretty good. I think this car is driving pretty smooth.
Yeah, we're looking pretty good.
I will drive us into
here.
the sunset, and Bill will meet you on the other side on January the 5th. Just a couple tweets I want to deal with. So funny enough, say underscore guy, he was saying that, you know, he thinks that Heather Mazier would be a really good choice to fill Mikulski's seat. And, you know, the funny thing is literally as soon as we went off air and during commercial break, that's exactly the conversation we had. Too bad we don't air our commercial breaks, or you would have heard us had a whole conversation about why Heather had a shot. But sadly, sorry, that didn't happen. Either way, we appreciate you. And thanks for tweeting. Thank you guys so much. Before we get to the end of the show, thank you guys. Listen, 2.5 hours you've been with me, and it's been awesome. I'm pretty sure you've had a couple cups of coffee. I've had a couple myself. Well, I'm drinking tea because I'm a tea drinker, but God bless America anyway. And as always, you can join the conversation by tweeting at BP Show or tweeting me at Richard A. Fowler. Listen, so at the beginning of the show, we started this conversation off about having a real dialogue and conversation about how we deal with the intersectionality between communities of color and police and all these different pieces. We're joined by the one and only Lourdes Ashley Hunter, the co-founder of Trans Women of Color Collective. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm good. Tired, but good. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you, too.
So we've had, listen, the audience has been really, really animated about this conversation, right? And I think, you put into play Mayor de Blasio and all the situation with the NYPD. And you really see that there is this sense of there's this unbalance. But I'm encouraged by this unbalance. I think in situations like this where there's unbalance is where you get the most change. It's because it's uncomfortable. People are finally uncomfortable. And being uncomfortable is like the perfect sort of gumption for change. Maybe that's just me.
Absolutely. For far too long, people have been sitting in excrement, and for somehow they've become complacent with the everyday status quo. And so the uncomfortability is where the transformation happens. So this is a good thing.
Touche. And I got to tell you, I think it's very reminiscent to. And I haven't seen the movie yet. I'll probably see it sometime between now and Monday. Selma. And it's interesting the movie came out right now because, I think it's one of those things where moving into 2015, we're almost reliving it again. We're reliving it in this really, really weird sort of way because you've had almost 150 days of, agitation. Right? And agitation that everybody's had to answer. Everybody's had to deal with. Rand Paul had to deal with this agitation. And now you have, because power never ceases willingly. So now that those that are in power, whether it be political power or, power over communities, i.e. police, they're now doubling down. And they're sort of hunkered down in their position because when in doubt, double down, right?
Right. I would like to actually challenge you on the fact that this is like something that's this 150 days. I think in this digital era, we now have more access to what has been happening. And I think that the civil unrest has been happening throughout, not just now with Mike Brown or with Eric Garner, because we've been murdered in the streets. So I think that now that we're in this age of this digital era, people have more access to the media and also the ability to create their own media and write their own narratives.
No, I think listen, I agree with you on that one. And I agree with you. And I'll add to that. I think that's when we saw the turning point in the civil rights movement, when people started to get televisions in their home and media became accessible, right? Where people, people in New York City and people in Chicago and people in Detroit were seeing what was going down in Selma and what was happening in Montgomery and the idea that people were being hosed and, attacked by dogs. And so I think you're right. I think to some extent we had a caller early, Misty, who she gave me life this morning. And what she said, it was so bright. She's like, the ideal that now young people are in the media and they're sort of pushing forward this narrative, they're beginning to sort of own it.
Right.
And there's that's the thing where the battle ensues.
Right. These young people have not experienced the levels of discrimination and have not had the opportunity to be given these concessions, these mortgages, these degrees, these credit cards. So they're not comfortable with concessions and they want more.
Right. And I think to add to that, and I think there's been it's an interesting place that we're in, because even within the African American community, you have this sort of internal conflict between the established organizations who we all love and do great work, and
namely.
Oh, I wasn't going to name any. See, you're trying to get me in trouble on the Bill Press show this morning. You have your traditional African American civil rights groups who do good work. They've been doing good work, but now they're sort of met with this new, younger, young and I like to call it young and scrappy. I like young and scrappy, right? They met with this young and scrappy civil rights movement, and they're trying to contend.
Well, you don't look that old, so I'm not for sure about young and scrappy.
I'm young and scrappy.
Exactly, right? And so I feel like I'm a bit young as well, but I think like
scrappy.
I'm angry, and I accept that, right? I'm angry, and so I think this new age is like we're not gonna sit up and just wait for trickle down economics, for trickle down quote unquote equality. We want it now, and I think they're also taking pages from what they've seen in the past. Right. With the Malcolm X, the Martin Luther King, the Black Panther movement. Like, we don't have to sit and wait for someone to save us. Your oppressor would never save you, and I think this millennial generation really understands that.
Oh no, and I'm a proud millennial. I think you're so right. I think what we saw from our parents' civil rights movement, I actually think that the baby boomers did us a total disservice, which is why we're in this era of constant, consistent anger, because our parents, the baby boomers, we love them, right? We love our parents. But what they did is because they were the ones who, their parents were the leaders of civil rights movement, so they saw the struggle and then they shielded us from, and not only...
It's true. They moved us to the suburbs. They put us in different schools.
And it's not only a black thing. I think it's even a white thing. I mean, even the student loan debt crisis.
Right.
Like, our parents are like, yeah, everybody should go to college. And so you were going to give you, just take these loans. I mean, they've shielded us from this reality. And now millennials are like, we're waking up, we're in debt, we don't own homes, we don't have cars. Our parents would get Social Security for us, and we're not quite sure, right? And so there's all these other pieces that has led to...
And we're being killed in the streets.
Right, exactly. And so it's led to this, what you call really, really diverse, uber diverse new civil rights movement. Then it's black, it's white, it's Hispanic, it's gay, it's lesbian, it's transgendered, it's bisexual, it's all these things, which makes it so amazing, but also makes it a force to be reckoned with by those traditional progressive groups.
Absolutely. I think this movement has opened up, and there is space for everybody, because we see how oppression works. We see how white supremacy works. It festers in every aspect of our lives, and it just not impacts some of us. It impacts all of us.
No, and I think, and I even, to add to that, I say this all the time, I think that there has to be, and I think we're finally seeing this, is that the movements are gelling, right? Like, because at one point in time, it was like, well, this is the LGBTQ movement, and we're the civil rights movement, and everybody was so siloed, and I think in this millennial group is definitely much more younger, scrappy. We're like, well, we agree, we could all get down with this.
I think Fabulous said it. I'm a movement by myself, but I'm a force when we're together, and it makes so much sense.
Absolutely, and I think you saw that when you look at New York City and the New York City protests, when rabbis are getting arrested with, African American young people, and it's all happening at once, and you're like, whoa, this is wild.
Absolutely. And even like what's been amazing for me, especially in 2014, in terms of our movements being more not necessarily inclusive but working in collaboration, is the Black Lives Matter movement, and them under that particular movement understanding like transgender nonconforming people, like those lives must be included. We're Black lives too. I sat at a Black caucus for 2 hours. They're talking about the state of the Black community, and I was like, okay, can we talk about the 12 trans women of color that were murdered in this country in a 6-month time span with no national outcry from the Black community? And they were like, well, that's really an LGBT issue, and you should talk about that in the LGBT caucus. And I was like, well, I'm Black, my mama's Black, my daddy's Black, my brother's Black, and so now we're beginning to have conversations that are not necessarily inclusive, but are working in collaboration with all of our movements so that we can galvanize.
Oh yeah, because I think a threat to injustice anywhere is a threat. I think MLK had it right. Is a threat to justice everywhere, and I think you're absolutely right. We've so tried to section off all the respective issues, and I think that has a lot to do with, in the African American community, has to do a lot to do with religion and all these other pieces. And I think people are finally realizing that we've been sort of sold this. And I hate to beat up on the baby boomers, and I don't think we have any in there. Bill Press is a baby boomer, but Bill Press is on our side, so it's okay.
Okay.
No. He told us last week he's a Gen X.
But either way, I think that there is this, there was such this big isolation. I think now we know that we have a couple problems. We have racism, we have bias, we have poverty, we have economic inequality, and all those things mixed together in a jar creates basically a powder keg. And I think we're really pushing against it, and we're really working towards it. And now the question is how do you create now systemic change? And it's not about, and I tell these people, it's not necessarily just about voting. It's more than that.
Oh, it goes way beyond that. And it's like we have to unlearn everything that we have learned. Like, I think that folks need to own that they have been lied to, right? And they have been lied to by people who may have had their best interests at heart, and not like in a malicious way, just to continue to reinforce the status quo. And so I think when we own that, we can move forward. In the same way you learned how to be oppressive, you can unlearn that, and you can learn how to love people. It's a really simple concept that people really need to grasp, but people are holding on to these notions of heteropatriarchy, white supremacy, all of these things that oppress others, because that's all they have to hold on to.
Lord Jesus, Lourdes is preaching today on the Bill Press Show, but we've got to go to a break. She's coming back with us in the next segment. Don't go anywhere. We'll continue this conversation after this break.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Just this month, my bill was like $138.
Even at one phone call a week cost me $40 to $50 every month.
I am living on a fixed income of SSI, so this is really a great hardship. Families are being punished. When they incarcerate your children, they incarcerate the whole family.
In 2011, the Media Action Grassroots Network, Working Narratives, and Prison Legal News founded the Campaign for Prison Phone Justice, an effort to call on the FCC to address the cost of interstate phone calls. The campaign mobilized prisoners to send hundreds of letters. Advocates and families filled out postcards, met with elected officials, and signed petitions. Partnerships were formed across the political spectrum and with groups in the criminal justice, civil rights, and public interest community. The film distribution company Participant Media and director Ava DuVernay joined the fight through a social action campaign tied to the release of the feature film Middle of Nowhere. In an effort to push the FCC to act, the campaign hosted a historic rally outside of the Federal Communications Commission where for the first time, families of prisoners, elected officials, civil rights and faith leaders came together to call for an end to predatory phone rates.
We're all held captive when predatory phone companies gouge our families.
My son has been incarcerated now for over 10 years, and my husband estimates that in the time we spent over $25,000 on prison phone calls.
My hero's not yours, you probably arrested them. Your schools probably neglected them. They spawn thoughts, you probably infected them. Feed us what you feed us, you can lay us next to them. FBI call it major crimes. Babies making babies cry.
Two anti-government, self-described revolutionaries have shot up a pizza restaurant as well as a Walmart in Las Vegas.
The internationally syndicated political series, The David Pakman Show, provides progressive talk, analysis, and interviews with the nation's youngest radio and television host, David Pakman. Find out more and catch up on all the latest episodes by visiting our website at freespeech.org.
Online. This is The Bill Press Show.
Yo, we're back on the Bill Press Show. Richard Fowler here, filling in for the one and only Bill Press, who is on a vacation. We are just about 15 minutes from the close of our show and just about 15 hours away from what was going to be an awesome 2015. We're joined by Lourdes Ashley Hunter. Welcome to the show. Lourdes Ashley Hunter. Excuse me, I got the first part right. And I got to tell you, I think I'm very optimistic. Even though, don't get me wrong, I think the shooting of those police officers was awful and heartbreaking from all the work that people have done around peaceful, nonviolent protests. A little bit of agitation, civil disobedience, and that's fine. That's what you do. You have to agitate the system. But, I think that was sort of it was hard to deal with. But I think going into 2015, I'm really optimistic for what is going to be, an exciting, year of action when it comes to fixing a lot of these problems.
Absolutely. And I have great expectations for 2015. But before we move forward, I don't think the killing of those police officers are not inextricably linked to the protest.
No.
Right? This guy came from Maryland before he killed his girlfriend.
And he shouldn't have had a gun
right?
to begin with.
And so, it's like we're erasing the narratives of women again, because there was a woman who was murdered before these police officers were. And so I think that not just to talk about how the police officers were murdered, but this guy was also not in a state of mind. So I really don't want to link those killings.
No, I completely agree with you. I don't think they're linked. I think, sadly, because of how the media narrative plays out, they're inextricably linked. And so, as a movement, progressive or Black Lives Matter, you have to find a way to parse and deal with, because it becomes this ultimate blame game. Oh well,
Sure.
It's the protesters' fault, and it's De Blasio's fault. I don't think it's any of those people's fault, but I think they're inextricably linked, and because of that, it's sort of put a damper. But with that being said, I think, I'm really hopeful of what's next.
Yeah, they are inextricably linked, right? But they're not. It's not a cause and effect, of course.
No.
I'm excited to see what's next, especially for Black Lives Matter movement and just movements. Period. Social justice movements. Period. How they continue to expand and continue to just dismantle systems of oppression.
Yeah, and I think what you'll find in 2015 is we're going to find some unlikely allies, and I want to talk about that in a little bit. Like, I think we're going to find some. I give a great example. I think Rand Paul might be an unlikely ally to what seems to be some sort of social justice. Not on everything. I think Elizabeth Warren. I think there's going to be some unlikely allies that we find throughout the way. That's going to be helpful in sort of moving the agenda forward.
I think that's exciting to hear that Rand Paul might be.
Well, I think on some of the criminal justice reform stuff, Rand Paul and even the Koch brothers came out yesterday and were like, we do need criminal justice reform.
They just need to. I can't say that.
Yeah.
Good time.
But no, I listen. I just think that the movement is so. It's just this ball of fire that. Both, and I think to bring it back to Washington, in 2015, all these presidential candidates are going to have to deal with.
Absolutely.
Whether you're Hillary Clinton, you're Martin O'Malley, you're Jeb Bush, you're Chris Christie, you're going to have to deal with this issue. And you can't just be like, I'm going to ignore it.
You can't ignore it. I mean, like, if you ignore it, that's just, you're killing yourself by doing that. I think it's important that there's room at the table for everyone, and people are not going to continue to just settle for crumbs. It's just not going to work.
So here's the question to you then. How do the 2016 contenders not ignore this?
By placing people in their team, in their leadership team, who can speak to these issues specifically, and also adapting that type of framework that is not necessarily inclusive but works in collaboration with other communities.
Okay, so so let's put this into play a little bit. So Hillary Clinton is a nominee. So is it that she has in her team, she has folks from she has people who are sort of the quote unquote, you would say, leaders of this movement, or is it that she adopts parts of this movement? Like, what is the exact?
She has to adopt the framework and the analysis. You cannot just hire a Black person and say, "Oh, I've met a quota." No, you actually have to understand, and you can't just hire one. It has to be representative of a group that's not that is marginalized. And so, also, like I said, you have to also have the analysis and the framework. You can't just hire a person and say you've met the quota.
No, that's true, and I think you're 100% right. I think it's about adopting the mindset and making sure that you have the willingness and the wherewithal to reject the notions of what was who was in former leadership, right? And I think that's going to be the dance that a lot of these candidates
because it's not it's not a popular position to say, okay, I don't know things,
right?
And so people don't want to act like they don't know, because in America, not knowing is ignorance, and ignorance is not a leader. But a true leader can say, I don't know these things. I'm not the expert in these things. So it's important for me to not only have people who are experts, but also understand the analysis and the framework.
What do you want to see from the president in 2015?
Oh my God.
Uh-oh, we might have a new soundbite for this year.
I want him to not care what other people think about him.
I agree. I so agree with. I just think that this White House, in my opinion, I love them, but I think he lacks a sense of boldness. It's all like, I think they've pulled themselves to death, and I think you're right. Not caring about.
You would never make everyone happy.
No,
never.
You're never going to make everyone happy. So, I agree. I agree 100%. Lourdes Hunter, Ashley Hunter, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We've got to pay some bills. We'll be right back with my final thoughts for this final Bill Press show of the final show of the year, my final show guest hosting. We'll be right back after this break. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Bill Press Show.
It is possible to read the history of this country as one long struggle to extend the liberties established in our Constitution to everyone in America. In other words, who, according to our laws and culture, gets to be considered a person? The law creates legal personhood, and movements create law and change culture. So, how have the courts passed laws to shape our culture? That history goes way back before Citizens United. 1819, Dartmouth College versus Woodward, Supreme Court case, turned a corporate charter from a government-granted charter to a contract. This ruling gave corporations standing within the Constitution. 1886, Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. Though the court did not rule on corporate personhood, the decision was subsequently cited as a precedent to hold that a private corporation is entitled to the same 14th Amendment rights of due process and equal protection as human beings. This makes it impossible for us to make laws that treat local businesses any differently than giant multinational corporations, even if their business practices are deemed to be harmful to workers, the environment, and communities, or if they have a history of violating the law. Hale versus Henkel, 1906. The court granted corporations the Fourth Amendment search and seizure protection. Dodge versus Ford Motor Company, 1919. The Michigan Supreme Court says the business corporation is organized and carried on primarily for the profit of the stockholders. Stockholder primacy is established. The purpose of the corporation, according to the court, is no longer to serve the public good, as it had been. It is now to maximize profit for shareholders above all else. Pennsylvania Coal Company versus Mahon, 1922. Corporations get the Fifth Amendment takings clause, meaning if you pass a regulation that impacts a corporation's ability to make a profit, that is deemed a taking, and they can sue for the right to future profits lost. This creates a chilling effect, and local and state governments become much more hesitant to pass laws in the public interest for fear that corporations can claim loss of potential profits that cities and states will be on the hook to pay. Buckley versus Vallejo, 1976. The Supreme Court rules that spending money to influence elections is protected under the First Amendment, in effect saying that money is speech. Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, 2010.
Today, the Supreme Court of Chief Justice John Roberts declared that because of the alchemy of its 19th century predecessors in deciding that corporations had all the rights of people, any restrictions on how these corporate beings spend their money on political advertising are unconstitutional.
The court's ruling threatens to undermine the integrity of elected institutions across the nation. It's a rejection of the common sense of the American people.
Radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
And we're back on The Bill Press Show. Final moments, final thoughts. Let all acquaintance be forgotten. This is Richard Fowler filling in for Bill Press. And as always, you guys know how I like to end up the show when I'm hosting. I will call this the Bill Press moment because you used to call it the Richard Fowler moment, but it's my final thoughts. And this one comes from Henry Wordsworth Longfellow, who says, "Resolve and thou art free." So you have about 15 hours and some change. Don't go into the new year with all this junk and all the hate and all the mess of 2014. So pick up the phone, call that person, say you're sorry. Don't go in with remorse. I mean, listen, trying to change stuff that already happened in the past is just impossible to do. You only can live in the present. So go into the new year optimistic and get rid of all the junk from the old year, folks. Clean it out. Thanks to everybody here at the team. A Squared in the control room. Thank you guys. We'll see you. Bill Brass will be back on.